Chapter 92. Novel Network, to provide you with exciting novel reading. Since it was just the beginning, the training was very basic. There was physical training in the morning and a 10,000-meter run 3 times a day. In the afternoon, they practiced the spear made from a wooden stick. They practiced the basic movements of blocking, holding, stabbing, wrapping, circling, pouncing, pointing, and pushing. She knew about the spear because she had been to the Museum of Ancient Times in her previous life. The history of the evolution of weapons in the military school also briefly described the evolution and development of weapons in the ancient times, modern times, ancient times, modern times, and modern times. Su-ku held the spear that the carpentry workshop had rushed to make. He weighed it in his hand and suddenly thrust it forward. It looked quite imposing. I couldn't tell. You look as weak as a chicken, but when you play with a spear, you have quite a bit of power. Su-ku was speechless. Chicken. Chicken? Haha, so that's how Lang Jun sees him. Tao Wu put away the spear. Su-ku looked like he had nothing left to live for. Lang Jun, I'm sorry. Jiang Pengji smiled without saying a word. She raised her hand and pointed at the other wooden spear. The spear bounced up and jumped into Jiang Pengji's palm. She smiled and said, "Do you want to loosen your muscles and bones?" Su-ku was stunned. Before he could understand what she meant, a wooden spear came at him. He subconsciously blocked it with the body of the spear, but he found that Jiang Pengji did not use much strength. It looked like she was just fooling around. With this in mind, Su-ku felt a little more confident. If that's the case, Lang Jun, please come. The audience watching the live stream found that Su-ku could use the wooden spear so skillfully. His moves were simple and clean, which greatly overturned the impression of a weak scholar they had in their minds. That skill, that posture. How did he look like a weak chicken? In fact, the 6 arts of a gentleman included etiquette, music, archery, imperial carriage, calligraphy, and mathematics. Many scholars could pick up a pen and write poems, ride a horse and play with a spear and shoot arrows, and more or less had some martial arts. Even though most of them were just for show, they looked good but were useless. However, it didn't matter if he was just for show or not. For Jiang Pengji, it didn't make much of a difference. They fought for the time it took to burn a stick of incense. Su-ku's legs were weak, his eyes were dizzy, his arms were swollen, his palms were bleeding from the rough wooden spear, and his whole body was drenched in sweat. But Jiang Pengji still looked like nothing had happened. Even her breathing was not irregular, and her forehead was dry. Young people still need to train. His arms are as soft as noodles. This won't do. She smiled and stabbed the wooden spear into the ground. Like a knife cutting through tofu, half of the spear entered the ground. I'm not talented, but Lang Jun is brave. Su-ku cupped his hands and smiled bitterly. He was better at using his brain, and this kind of activity almost made him sprain his waist. As for Jiang Pengji's teasing, he just ignored it and didn't take it to heart. You're still young, so you need to train more. I'm weak and have a lot of problems. I can't stay idle. If you follow me, you really have to train hard. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll get tired. Jiang Pengji smiled and encouraged him. Literature can bring peace to the world, and martial arts can bring peace to the world. Just thinking about it makes my blood boil. Xiaoyu, if you're willing, you can train with these people. She could see that Su-ku did have some skills. Wouldn't it be a pity to waste them? I was young and ignorant. I was a ranger for a period of time. Later, I met my teacher and was enlightened. That's why I became obsessed with the sage's books. Every man had the dream of being a great hero. He would help the weak and rob from the rich to help the poor. Su-ku was no exception. He had a period of chinibyu, but in the end, he put down his sword and picked up his brush to study quietly. He wanted to be a good son who could make his mother feel at ease. It was a pity that his mother died young before she could enjoy her son's filial piety for a few years. Jiang Pengji tilted her head and complained, young and ignorant. You make it sound like you're very mature now. Su Ku was speechless. On the other side, a friend who was watching the live stream gave Su Ku an emoji. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, young Su Ku, Lang Jun, I'm telling you, you'll lose your baby if you keep this up. Jiang Pengji glanced at it and said to Su Ku with a smile. Were you thinking that if I continue to tease you, you'd throw a tantrum? Su Ku blushed and said awkwardly. Lang Jun, please don't joke around. Jiang Pengji said to him seriously, actually, you can throw a tantrum. I can tolerate it. A little temper makes you cuter. In her eyes, Su Ku was a teenager who threw a tantrum. It was fine for him to be stubborn once in a while. Su Ku was silent. How should he, as a page boy, deal with his Lang Jun, who was 5 years younger than him, rudely throwing a tantrum in front of him? Hurry. I'm waiting online. Reality proved that a rabbit would bite when it was anxious, and Su Ku would choke when he was anxious. Lang Jun, you should save your sweet words for the girls in Lang Lang Alley. After saying that, Su Ku cupped his hands and bowed, then flicked his sleeves and left. He could not vent his anger on Jiang Pengji, but it was not a problem for him to torment the servants. The more he understood, the more he felt that the image of the noble son in his mind was crumbling. Of course, it would not take long for him to realize that it was not the noble son who crumbled, but his weird Lang Jun. Tisk, tsk. Speaking of looks, the girls in Lang Lang Alley may not be as elegant as Xiaoyu. Jiang Pengji lowered her voice to make sure that Su Ku, who was swinging his sleeves, could hear her. Then, Jiang Pengji saw him stumble and miss his footing. He rolled down the ridge of the field. The audience in the streaming room felt sorry for Su Ku when he couldn't help teasing her. Canteen Daffin Auntie, streamer, you are so evil. You even bully a cute kid like Su Ku. I can't bear to see it. She's so adorable, so beautiful, how could you be so cruel to her? I really wanted to rush out of the screen and hug him. Badeo Zhangzi, I've never seen such an evil streamer. Look, you scared him. Sikeatu too, people in ancient times are very serious. If you do that, he may hate you. Be careful, he might become evil. Xian, ha ha ha, I'm looking forward to Su Ku's evil appearance. Then, he will fall in love with the heartless streamer. Jiang Pengji ignored the teasing comments on the screen. She walked to the ridge of the field, squatted down, and carried Su Ku, who was lying on the ground, on her back. Su Ku was shocked by her actions again. His body was obviously stiff and his muscles were tense. You're so careless even when you're walking. Fortunately, the ridge is low and has been carefully cleaned by the tenant farmers. There aren't any big rocks. Otherwise, you might have broken a leg and disfigured yourself. Jiang Pengji was carrying him on her back, but her steps were light and vigorous. Su Ku finally recovered from the shock. He did not know where to put his hands, and his face was full of embarrassment. Hearing Jiang Pengji's accusation, Su Ku felt a sense of helplessness. Chapter 93. Am I wrong to say that you're good-looking? Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and said matter-of-factly, it's something to be proud of if you're good-looking. It means that your appearance is much better than the average person. Love go small talk net ku. Su Ku could neither swallow nor spit it out. His originally pale face turned purple from the suffocation. That wasn't a compliment. She was flirting with him. I'll take you to Lang Lang Alley when I'm free. I don't want you to say that I'm flirting with you. She was always wrong. Su Ku was speechless. Jiang Pengji continued, but with your looks, I don't know if you're playing with them or if they're playing with you. Su Ku was speechless. Could she stop talking about Lang Lang Alley? She was going to be traumatized. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, then it must be those coquettish bitches playing with Su Ku. You'll be at a disadvantage if you go there. Even though the viewers in the streaming room were a bit weird, they had a normal aesthetic sense. They all felt that Su Ku would be at a disadvantage if he went to Lang Lang Alley. Thinking of the innocent young Su Ku falling into a group of coquettish cheese and being tossed and turned by them, he started to cry pitifully. At that moment, howls and howls could be heard from all directions in the live stream room. Xian, has the streamer decided to go to a brothel? You have to let me know when you're going to stream. Jiang Pengji promised, but she never expected that she would go to Lang Lang Alley under such circumstances. Love go small talk net ku, I just sprained my ankle. I'll be fine after a few days of rest and some medicine. Jiang Pengji was not a doctor, but she was constantly injured, both internally and externally. After a long period of time, she could be considered a doctor. Moreover, there were compulsory courses in the military school for first aid. Jiang Pengji had learned some, so it was not a problem for her to deal with such minor injuries. Lang Jun, you know medicine? Su Ku calmed down a lot, and his impression of Jiang Pengji was renewed. What lofty! What great talent! What wise lord! They were all the result of his blind judgment. She hated herself for being blind at that time. Why did she feel that this Lang Jun in front of her was a wise ruler? Jiang Pengji lied without blinking. My mother has been bedridden all year round. How can I be at ease? In his spare time, he had read some medical books and learned some superficial techniques and superficial knowledge. He couldn't be considered to be an expert in medicine. Speaking of which, I thought of something important. Su Ku was a very serious young man. Once serious business was brought up, his attention was involuntarily diverted. What is it? I took a look at their training today. These people really know how to endure hardship. They didn't cut corners during training, nor did they play tricks. It's just that I used too much force. If I don't take a good rest, I'm afraid I won't even be able to get up tomorrow, let alone train. Jiang Pengji could not help but think of her first days in a low-level military school in her previous life. It was tiring but fulfilling. After training, she had a special muscle-soothing nutrient solution, which was good for relieving fatigue and maintaining her training condition. However, the medical technology in this era was so backward that she couldn't count on nutrient solutions. She couldn't even use them herself, so she could only use another method instead. Moreover, it had to be more in line with this era and not too scary. Su Ku thought back to those people's training. After a day of torment, they were really exhausted. When they had a big pot to eat, they were like hungry wolves. They fought for food faster than anyone else, as if they were afraid that they would not have enough to eat. Training consumed a lot of energy. Lang Jun, do you have a way to deal with it? Jiang Pengji said, of course I do. I'll go back and draw a picture for you. Just follow it. The method she was talking about was the most basic massage. Almost all the students in the military school knew the basic techniques. Low-level military schools were very common. Most of the students there were ordinary people. Not everyone had the luxury of using nutrient solutions to relieve the stress of training. If Jiang Pengji had not been born with high numbers and potential, she would not have been lucky enough to be chosen as the focus of training. Of course, if she wanted to maximize the benefits, it was best to condense her mental strength on her fingertips to stimulate the activity of the muscles. However, mental strength was a mysterious thing. If she said it out loud, people might mistake it as nonsense. Jiang Pengji spent some time to draw a few simple pictures. She added some words to make sure that Su Ku could understand. Su Ku took the pictures and looked at them. His expression softened a little. He said, Lang Jun, thank you. It seemed that Lang Jun was quite reliable. While Jiang Pengji was drawing, there were also some viewers who were more careful. They used their phones or computers to record and take pictures. They wanted to try it out after taking a shower at night to see how it worked. Because of Jiang Pengji's arrangement, Su Ku lived in the farm during the early stages of training. He did not have to go back to the loos at night. If he needed to borrow any books, he could go back. All in all, except for the occasional unreliability of Lang Jun, the loos were treated very well. Su Ku tried to use his strength and found that his sprained foot did not hurt anymore. He stood up and sent her back. Before leaving, Jiang Pengji suddenly stopped and looked at Su Ku. Her gaze made Su Ku break out in cold sweat. Lang Jun? Remember one thing. You are now my servant, Jiang Pengji said with an inexplicable meaning. Jiang Pengji said with an inexplicable meaning, I'll let it go for today. From tomorrow onwards, remember this well. Su Ku's eyes were filled with suspicion. Then he suddenly understood and his face turned pale. Don't be so afraid. If you have anything to say, just tell him directly. He won't not understand. Jiang Pengji curled her lips, slapped the sandalwood fan in her hand, and closed it with a swoosh. That night, Su Ku smiled bitterly at the brush and ink on the long table. After thinking for a while, he picked up the brush and put it on the bamboo paper. As the servant of the second Lang Jun of the Lus, he received a fixed amount of brush, ink, and bamboo paper, in addition to the money he received every month. When the gods fight, the mortals suffer. It's not a good thing to be between the father and the son. But Lang Jun is right. Instead of suffering from both sides, it was better to stand firmly on one side. After Su Ku finished writing, he put the bamboo paper on the candle to warm it. When the ink was dry, he rolled it into a roll and walked to the porch. He waved at the sky. Not long after, a snow-white pigeon fluttered its wings and landed on his arm. It had a small bamboo tube tied to its claw. It was a messenger pigeon from Zhongzhou in the hinterland of the Central Plains to Dongqing. After a few years of development, in Dongqing, as long as the family was wealthy, they would raise and train a few pigeons to send messages. Coo coo, Lu Shi heard the pigeons cry. He got up and picked up the pigeon. He took out the bamboo paper and read it quickly. After a long time, he could not help but laugh. Chapter 94. Jiang Pengji returned to the Lus. As soon as she stepped through the gate, the system beeped and a mission letter popped up. System, dear host Jiang Pengji, the results of the preliminary selection for your first fully interactive live stream have been released. The topic with the most votes is I'm visiting a brothel in ancient times. Please complete the live stream within 3 days. It was an automatic notification from the system. Jiang Pengji glanced at it and then threw it into the system's trash can. I'm indeed visiting a brothel. Sure enough, this kind of thing always attracts people's curiosity. Jiang Pengji held her forehead. She had lost all hope for the viewers who did not go offline. She did not want to live stream anymore. If she blushed and drew a level advancement card, wouldn't that mean that her experience would become 10,000? The system said quietly, actually, I want to go too. Jiang Pengji was speechless. A system that only had data and no substance. Why would it want to go to a brothel? It was incompetent. It was still early for her to return to the Lu residence. She first went to her courtyard to freshen up. Although she did not sweat much, she was still somewhat dirty after shuttling back and forth in the fields for a long time. Moreover, she still had to endure Takshu's nagging. Lang Jun, you are so precious. You can just leave everything to Su Ku. You have to do it yourself. That's great. I've never seen Lang Jun look so dirty. 2 of his handkerchiefs are dirty. Jiang Pengji knew very well that she could not argue with the woman at this time, because no matter how reasonable she was, it would be unreasonable. Silence was the best comfort. As expected, Takshu felt that Jiang Pengji's attitude was good. She finally stopped nagging and closed her mouth. At that moment, Jiang Pengji did not expect Su Ku to have the guts to play a trick on her. Jiang Pengji accompanied Lu Shi and Madame Hu for dinner. She was in a good mood and ate 2 more bowls of rice. She ate more than Lu Shi and Madame Hu combined, but she put down her chopsticks at the same time as them. Lanting is still growing. Ask the kitchen to make 2 more meat dishes. Lu Shi had never had a good appetite, but when he looked at his daughter's face, he could eat a bowl of rice without stopping. Madame Hu, who knew him very well, secretly rolled her eyes. She couldn't be bothered to maintain her usual elegant demeanor. Madame Hu did not want to be known as someone who mistreated the late wife's son. She did not want to remind Lu Shi that he was sitting next to his daughter and not his son. If she continued to feed him without restraint, he would be so fat that he would be slaughtered by the end of the year. Jiang Pengji had never had the concept of gaining weight. To her, the food she ate would only become firm muscles, not fat. After, shyly, thanking Lu Shi, Jiang Pengji resumed her posture of looking down and wondering when Lu Shi would speak. It wasn't that she didn't know that Lu Shi always asked about her life through Su Ku. His original intention was to care about her and nothing else. His original intention was not bad. She actually quite enjoyed this kind of concern. But Jiang Pengji was rational. She knew that she could not enjoy it for long. If she did not stop it soon, it would one day become a malignant tumor and become the root of the rift between father and son. Even the most intimate people had to maintain a certain distance, especially between a father and a son. The former had the natural responsibility to raise the latter. She had a very strong personality. She couldn't stand other people telling her what to do for no reason. She also couldn't accept other people trying to control her life all the time. It was like a steel cage imprisoning her in a corner of the world, even if that person was Lu Shi. She could enjoy it if it happened once or twice, but she could not guarantee that she would not fall out with him. So to prevent the worst from happening, it was better to make things clear as soon as possible. If Lu Shi wanted to know something, he could ask her directly instead of going through a third party. But she did not expect Lu Shi to not play by the rules. He did not feel embarrassed at all when he confessed that he knew about his daughter through Su Ku. What he said made Jiang Pengji want to kneel in front of him. Su Ku sent me a messenger pigeon. He said that you were curious about Lang Lang Alley. It was dessert time for the family. It was also a time to talk and cultivate their relationship. The atmosphere was not as dull as it was during dinner. Jiang Pengji asked, "What?" Madame Hu glared at Lu Shi. She looked like she would strangle him if he said another word. "Yes, I did," Jiang Pengji admitted. She was not only curious, but she also planned to go to the alley the next day. "But why did you bring this up all of a sudden, father?" She looked at Madame Hu and motioned for Lu Shi to calm down. Talking about brothels with his son in front of his concubine. Was he not afraid of being beaten to death? However, Lu Shi was too cunning. How could he betray Su Ku? "You are not young anymore. There are some things that you should know." Lu Shi raised his eyebrows at her suggestively. Jiang Pengji almost choked on the tea she was holding in her mouth. Before she could cough, Madame Hu raised her hand and flipped the table in front of her into the air. It fell to the ground with a loud crash. Madame Hu gritted her teeth and shouted at Lu Shi, "Lu Zhongqing." Lu Shi did not have the slightest idea that his backyard was in trouble. Instead, he smiled gently. "Cousin, do you want to go too?" Jiang Pengji was speechless. Not only did he talk about brothels in front of his concubine, he even asked if she wanted to go with him. Jiang Pengji wanted to kneel in front of her. "Be careful, Sister Amin might come and strangle you to death tonight." "You're really," Madame Hu's face turned red with anger. She was so angry, but Lu Shi was still smiling calmly. He was not affected in the slightest. "Humph." Madame Hu flung her sleeves angrily and strode out of the main courtyard. "That's her temper. Don't be scared." Lu Shi regained his gentle and serious look. "It's normal for someone your age to be curious about that kind of place. Instead of waiting for you to go there quietly and run into something you can't handle, it's better for me to bring you there and broaden your horizons. Once you see it with your own eyes, you won't be curious anymore." Jiang Pengji was speechless. It was a good reason, but why did she feel that something was wrong? "Father, you don't seem surprised at all." Jiang Pengji swore that it was not Lu Shi's first time going to that kind of place. It was a lie to say that he loved Gu Min. "I used to be your age. How could I not know?" Lu Shi was very open-minded. His eyes were clear and gentle. By the way, your mother was the one who encouraged me to go there for the first time. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Chapter 95. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Lu, she said gently, the harmony of yin and yang is the right thing to do. What's there to be shy about? When a teenager, or girl, reaches a certain age, their curiosity toward the opposite sex will reach a high level. It's as if there's a soft claw scratching at their hearts. Stopping them with righteous words or reprimanding them for a long time will only stimulate their rebellious mentality. Jiang Pengji was speechless. She was afraid that if she said a few more words, her father would turn back to his room and toss her 2 paintings of avoiding fire. Thinking about that beautiful scene was too painful for her eyes. She didn't dare to look at it. Speaking of which, father, have you forgotten that you are raising a daughter, not a son? Lu, she made the decision and said, there's no time like the present. Let's do it today. Jiang Pengji maintained a calm expression on her face, but she was already cursing the system in her heart. I feel like I've come to a pirated ancient era. How can someone like Lu she survive in such an environment? The system pretended to be dead again. After all, Gu Min's appearance in this era was inseparable from it. Forget it. Let's do it tonight. I don't want to have to make a trip in the future. The audience in the streaming room was surprised to find that the streaming room, which had been closed for less than 2 hours, was back up again. There was also an option to vote on audience satisfaction. The subtitle of the streaming room was, A Night at a Brothel in the Ancient Era? Awesome streamer. Pudding is not pudding, what the F***ck. It's rare for me to come in, but I'm so lucky to have such an important stream. The streaming room had a maximum audience of 3,000, but there were many who wanted to watch the stream. Many people watched Jiang Pengji's stream through videos. Even though they had never entered the streaming room, Jiang Pengji's unique style left a deep impression on them. Peacock Southeast flies. Is the streamer going to have sex with a human? Will it be banned? Last time, there was a streamer on the roasted fish platform who broadcast the process of making a human. However, it wasn't long before it was banned by the management. In the end, she was even called over by the police for tea. Liang Feng Yoxing, come on, the streamer's streaming room is amazing. I have a relative who works on the grilled fish platform. He told me that although the host's room number can be found, they don't have the data at all, so they can't block it. Chuyue Wubian, in other words, if the streamer really wants to put on a big show, we can also watch as much as we want. Dolly Buting, no way, the host looks like she's still underage. What's so good about her figure? She's just a frying pan. Now, previous user, if you keep talking like this, the host might go crazy and show you what it means to be sliced into 1,000 pieces. It's definitely bloody and violent. You might even wet your pants. The host was a woman. If she wanted to have sex, she would have gone to a small brothel, not a brothel. Daming Hao Nan, when it comes to sanitary napkins, you think of women's menstruation. When it comes to brothels, you think of men and women having sex. Is your brain filled with perverted trash? Could their thoughts be a little more pure? This was clearly a very serious and inspiring live broadcast room. Because of the sudden start of the live broadcast, many old viewers were unable to squeeze in. 90% of the live broadcast room were unfamiliar faces, and the atmosphere became a little impetuous. Jiang Pengji took a look and her expression became colder and colder. There would always be people who did not learn their lesson. It was okay to joke, but it depended on who the person was joking with. If it was just a stranger, the joke would not be a joke. It would be vulgar and vulgar. Xian, am I the only one who noticed that the host's father is in the carriage? Excuse me? Many viewers were dumbfounded. What was going on? Lang Lang Alley was located on a street near the market in Hejin County. It was very far away from the Lu residence, Sanshu Street. Jiang Pengji used the fan to slightly open the curtain of the carriage. The sky outside had already turned dark, but both sides of the street were filled with red lights, which made the night look bright. A gust of wind mixed with many fragrances blew over, which made Jiang Pengji, whose 5 senses were very sensitive, suffer. This is Lang Lang Alley? It looks so lively. Unlike the other countries, Dongqing did not have a curfew. Therefore, every night, the streets nearby were insanely lively. Here, even the air was thick with a romantic atmosphere. It seemed to have become the best catalyst. However, for Jiang Pengji, the suffering was greater than the enjoyment. What's more, the woman she glanced at was not very good-looking. Bad review. Lu Shi sat up straight with a smile on his face. Of course not. Oh. Lu Shi explained, Lang Lang Alley was built at the beginning of the Xia dynasty. It has always been divided into 1 pavilion, 4 courtyards, and 12 palaces. It has been passed down since then, and it has lasted for hundreds of years. In the Great Xia dynasty, many high-ranking officials and nobles are willing to spend a fortune just for a smile from a beauty in Lang Lang Alley. Even though it's a brothel, it's still a rare place of elegance. Those who aren't from prominent families can't enter. It sounds different from what I imagined. Jiang Pengji frowned. Lu Shi sneered and said disdainfully, what's the difference? Lang Lang Alley seems to have a high threshold, but it is just a way to raise one's value. They are indifferent to you because the value you offer them is not high enough, and what they can get is too little. It has nothing to do with other affairs. If it was still in the Xia dynasty, Lang Lang Alley would have been an extraordinary place. It was just a place of prostitution, but there were so many extraordinary women. But after the establishment of Dongqing, Lang Lang Alley became an ordinary place of prostitution. Many brothels opened along the street. That's what you see now. It is a place where ordinary men and women seek pleasure. It looks prosperous, but it is actually rotten. The carriage passed through the long street full of red lanterns and drove into an alley. The temperature seemed to drop suddenly, and the smell in the air became lighter. It was neither too light nor too strong. It was like a dandelion brushing against the back of one's hand, itchy and smooth. Here we are. Jiang Pengji lifted the curtain and read the words on the plaque. Hanyan Courtyard? Shall we go in? It was more of a mansion than a courtyard. The facade was neat and tidy, and it was several times bigger than the Lu mansion. Lu Shi closed his eyes and thought for a while. He changed his mind and said, no, let's find another one. Why? Jiang Pengji asked in confusion. She also asked the question that was on everyone's mind. You don't look interested at all. Although this Hanyan courtyard is a place of prostitution, the women there are all talented women who are good at music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Many patrons come to our door not for the joy of family relations, but more to drink a few cups of sake. The more advanced a brothel was, the more noble the women there were. Some of them were as good as the women of noble families. Chapter 96. Lu Shi paused and his expression turned strange. After a long time, he said, your mother calls this behavior pretentious of a beast in human clothing. Love go little say net w. True men who come to Lang Lang Alley to seek pleasure must come from well-off families and have many wives and concubines. However, they still like to come to this kind of place. Why do you think they do so? It's not because of the women's looks, but because of their talents. There were few literate women, and women who were well-read, talented, and considerate were even rarer. Those men didn't have a common language with their wives and concubines at home, and they couldn't talk for a long time. But when they came to Lang Lang Alley, they could find their soulmates and talk happily. It was more satisfying than having sex. It was hard for people who weren't of the same kind to understand. At first, Lu Shi thought it made sense, but as soon as he expressed his opinion, Gu Min scolded him. Mother, you're such a clever person. You're so insightful. Jiang Pengji agreed. Wasn't it pretentious of a beast in human clothing? If that's the case, Lang Lang Alley should be quiet. Why don't you go there, father? Lu Shi looked down and said, you like crowds. I don't think you'll find an atmosphere you like there. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Pudding is not pudding, no one knows a daughter better than her father. Father, let me give you a like. Xian, wow, the host's father is still so cute. It feels super harmonious when father and daughter get along. Especially when the host's father teases the host seriously. I can feel the host's powerlessness in the bullet screen. Chow Zhao Mu Mu, ha ha ha, the host has met her nemesis. Now, I bet on a spicy stick that the host's inner bullet screen is full of sh*t. Lu she picked a brothel with a large area and a lot of customers. The name was very tacky, Ingchun Brothel. Even though Lu she had left Hejian County for many years and no one remembered his face, his elegance coupled with his exquisite silk cloak made him stand out in the crowd. He was the kind that could be found in a sea of people at a glance. The brothel keeper's eyes lit up, and she welcomed her enthusiastically. Jiang Pengji could not help but think of the woman broker she saw in the broker house that day. Guests, please come in. The brothel keeper waved her fragrant handkerchief. Lu she furrowed his brows and took a step back to avoid the brothel keeper's hand. Find the prettiest woman here to serve me. I want a private room, and don't be too noisy. Lu Shi's expression remained cold and indifferent. He wasn't as frivolous or joyful as other men who were looking for pleasure. The madam was puzzled, but she had been in the brothel for many years. She had good judgment. The man in front of her was obviously not here to have fun. Thus, the madam lowered her head slightly and silently met Jiang Pengji's gaze. So he was the one who was looking for pleasure. The madam instantly knew the truth. Her heavily made-up face bloomed like a flower. Don't worry, sir. In this area, everyone knows that the girls in our Ingchun house are the best. I guarantee you will enjoy yourself to the fullest. After saying that, the madam turned around and called for a skinny girl in green to lead the two to a private room. The madam looked to be in her early 30s. In the eyes of the people of this era, she was already middle-aged. However, the charm that she exuded was not something that young ladies could imitate. Her charm was still there, so. Jiang Pengji watched her leave. Lu she looked down and asked Jiang Pengji what was wrong with his eyes. Jiang Pengji opened the sandalwood fan in her hand and used it to cover her face. Only a pair of smiling eyes could be seen. The way that madam walks reminds me of a phrase, swaying. The corner of Lu Shi's mouth twitched. He made an oh sound as if he had nothing left to live for. Why did he feel that something was not right? Please follow me, Lang Jun. The girl in green was still young. She looked to be no more than 10 years old. However, after living in such a place for a long time, she had developed an extraordinary eye for people. Whether it was the way she spoke or the way she bowed, she looked very proper. Jiang Pengji furrowed her brows and suppressed her 5 senses. Only then did she feel better. The private room was not small. When the girl in green opened the door, the elegant attire that came into view was refreshing. A private room, a private room. It lives up to the word elegant. Go get someone to prepare a table of light vegetarian dishes and bring 2 pots of sake over. Jiang Pengji looked around and then sat down at the 4-corner table in the middle of the private room. She leaned against the table and seemed to be enjoying herself. By the way, do you have any girls who sing for fun? Pudding is not pudding, I'll bet a spicy stick that the streamer is a veteran. Didn't you see the look of despair on her father's face? The live stream audience member said what Lu Shi was thinking. He was a little nervous when he saw that his daughter was familiar with the place and did not seem to have any stage fright at all. Could it be that before he came back, his daughter was already a regular customer here? Lu Shi could be considered calm, but he could no longer remain calm. Jiang Pengji could read the voice in Lu Shi's mind. She raised her hand, flipped the teacup on the table, and poured herself a cup. Father, don't overthink it. It's my first time here. Lu Shi was speechless. She was trying to cover it up. Before the father and daughter could further discuss the issue, the figure who was kneeling outside the door bowed slightly. Lang Jun, the girls are here. Jiang Pengji said boldly, "Come in." Then, the door opened and two girls, about 16 or 17 years old, came in. The material of their clothes was comparable to that of a normal girl from a wealthy family. Behind them were four girls who were holding musical instruments and had their hair combed into a girl's bun. The former sat next to Jiang Pengji and Lu Shi. One was delicate and the other was bright and beautiful. The latter sat quietly in the corner of the private room. "Host V, do you want to sing?" In a split second, the screen was filled with all kinds of song titles that were obviously not serious at a glance. Jiang Pengji saw one of them and turned to the four girls. "Do you know how to sing 18 Moons?" Pfft, even Lu Shi could not maintain his elegant demeanor at that moment. He spat out half a mouthful of tea that he had not yet swallowed. The girls who were singing looked at each other, and their cheeks turned red. Although it was a place to seek pleasure, nothing was too excessive. It was rare to see someone as upright as Jiang Pengji and Lu Shi. Jiang Pengji was still young, but Lu Shi, who was beside her, was at the age where a man's charm was at its peak. There was an indescribable sense of shame in singing that kind of flirtatious song in front of such an immortal-like person. "Go and serve her. I don't need anyone else here." Lu Shi quickly recovered and slightly tidied up his messy appearance. He did not look too good. Once again, he firmly believed that it was not his daughter's first time here. Chapter 97. Lu Shi reflected on himself and pushed away the pretty girl who was trying to get close to him. Jiang Pengji held the fan and smiled. "I'm just kidding. Just pick some soothing songs." She used her folding fan to lift the bright girl's chin and looked into the other's affectionate eyes. Sure enough, it was a pair of extremely beautiful limpid eyes that were just right. Not one bit more would make them look too weak, and not one bit less would make them look too lifeless. Jiang Pengji complained to Lu Shi, "You are so insensitive. How can you reject such a beautiful girl so rudely? You have to be tactful if you want to reject her. Aren't you going to hurt her?" Lu Shi glanced at Jiang Pengji. His meaning was clear. "What are you trying to do?" After coming to Yingchun brothel, he found that his daughter had started to let herself loose. He was worried. Jiang Pengji knew when to stop. What if Lu Shi refused to pay the bill if things went too far? It was okay to have fun in a brothel, but it was too much not to pay. Jiang Pengji smiled wickedly, revealing her white teeth, as the audience in the streaming room howled and the bullet screen filled with jealousy and hate. Lu Shi found the scene a little hard to look at. There had been a rumor that his daughter was a playboy, but as her father, he didn't believe it. Then, he was slapped in the face by his daughter's actions. "Hey, what kind of fragrance does this fairy-like lady use on her body? Why does it smell so good?" Lu Shi didn't pay attention to her for a while. Jiang Pengji was already talking to the two girls. They seemed to be very close. Lu Shi moved closer to the delicate girl. The girl's cheeks were flushed and she looked extremely shy. Lu Shi slowly moved closer to the girl's neck. From the outside, it looked as if she was half lying in the girl's arms. The two of them were so intimate that Lu Shi felt even more hopeless. The pretty girl blushed and said in a low voice, "I made all the perfume myself." The perfume on the market didn't suit everyone's skin. For the girls in the brothel, the condition of their skin was more important. The girls in the brothel were not to be underestimated. They all had their own unique skills. She was not good at making perfume herself. "You made it yourself? This smell is indeed very unique. It's fragrant but not greasy, thick but not overwhelming, and lingers for a long time. Truly fragrant." Jiang Pengji sniffed carefully again. If one paid close attention, one would notice that there was some interest in her eyes, as if she had found some evidence. This fragrance was somewhat familiar. "It's good that Lang Jun likes it." "I also like it," the woman said in a low voice, her face full of shyness. She was petite and dainty, not much taller than Jiang Pengji. Her posture was even more pitiful. When she lowered her head slightly and revealed her fair neck, This simple action could evoke the desire in a man's heart. Pudding is not pudding. Looking at this scene, I suddenly thought of a saying. I feel that it fits the situation very well. The gentleness of lowering one's head is just like the shyness of a water lotus in the cold wind. Dolly Buting, come on, no matter how pretty she is, she's still a prostitute. She's a whore who can sleep with anyone. What water lotus? She's not good enough. Now, what's wrong with the person above? Which word poked your D*ck? You watch the stream quietly, then jump out and step on others to show how clean you are. Sheehan, exactly. How noble are you to stand on the moral high ground and look down on her. Lanky Yubus, before looking down on their work, first consider the context of the era and think from another angle. Don't spout sh*t at the beginning. Where's your quality? Dolly Buting, hee, a bunch of saints. If they were so compassionate, why don't you suggest that the streamer save them? Their mouths are incessant. To put it bluntly, it's easier said than done. They're just whores. What did I say wrong? They're whores that make money when they open their legs. This streamer is also a whores. Jiang Pengji looked at the sudden chaos in the streaming room and frowned. The flames of war had spread to her. Chuyue Wubian, whores are heartless, and entertainers are unjust. I really don't know what's the use of arguing about this. The streamer didn't even say anything. If she didn't control it, the streaming room would become a slaughterhouse. Although Jiang Pengji could ignore the comments, she had a certain understanding of the audience. Once their emotions were extreme, they could say anything disgusting. It was annoying to watch. Streamer V, from the perspective of employment, they're also women in the workplace. They have a job to support themselves. It's just that the job doesn't look good to you. Moreover, it's difficult to survive in today's world. There are countless cases of people selling their children and exchanging their children for food. Although they're despised by others, the quality of their lives is very decent. I don't think others have any right to despise them. I can only say that everyone has their own way of living. It's okay to disagree, but please respect them. Sometimes, Jiang Pengji couldn't understand the thoughts of ancient and modern humans, such as now. In her era, this profession had been legal for thousands of years. It even had its own complete industry chain. From the perspective of federal law, this was in line with human rights because everyone had the right to control their own bodies. This was an inherent wealth. Therefore, she really couldn't understand why the audience in the streaming room were arguing. While she was still in a daze, the pretty girl beside her winked at her. She was young, but she had a kind of youthful and mature charm. She was quite attractive. Her eyes were full of charm, and her full lips seemed to be alluring. Lang Jun, do you like this fragrance? I've smelled it before, so when I smell the fragrance on your body, it's especially familiar. However, although this fragrance smells good, in my eyes, it's not even 1/10,000th of your appearance. I feel like I've seen you in a dream. Lu Shi ate the vegetables with a cold face. The location was not right, so he didn't want to drink at all. He didn't want to be taken advantage of when he was drunk. If the person in front of him was a son, he would throw a fire-repelling painting and find a prostitute to eat. He was devoted to Ah Min, but he couldn't expect his son to be alone. However, the point was, he only had his daughter. To put it crudely, visiting a brothel was nothing, but did his daughter have the tools to commit the crime? The beautiful girl who was chased away by Lu Shi was ignored. Of course, she wouldn't let it go. She covered her lips with an embroidered handkerchief. Her eyebrows were full of charm. She said, Lang Jun, you only care about teasing your sister. Have you forgotten about me? How can that be? It's obvious that my sister is ignoring me. Otherwise, why would she sit so far away? Then, what about this? She moved closer and rested her forehead on his shoulder. If that's the case, do you still blame me for ignoring you? I can't wait to be happy. How can I bear to blame you? Lu Shi, who was silently watching his daughter and the two girls teasing each other, was speechless. Chapter 98. Not long after, a slightly familiar voice floated over, with a hint of hostility. Hee hee, you old woman. I gave you so much money, but didn't I say that before I leave Hejin County, these two can only serve me? You, on the other hand, took advantage of the fact that I haven't been here for a few days and directly made the decision to have them serve others. Aren't you slapping my face? Without waiting for the madam to speak, a young man's voice, as clear as spring water brushing against a mountain stream, was heard. Lu Shi's eyes lit up. Lu Shi was like Jiang Pengji. Not only was he obsessed with appearances, but he was also obsessed with voices. Forget it, Zhengze. If you like it, you can ask 2 more courtesans to serve you. Why do you have to hold on to those 2 and offend them? Hearing the familiar voice, Jiang Pengji could not help but smile. She looked meaningfully at the pretty girl who took the initiative to lean into her arms. TSK, TSK. What is this called? It's fate. Tudu Feitio, is there something wrong with my ears? Why do I feel like I heard the young man's voice? Aya Jiaodong, you didn't hear wrong. I remember Zhengze is the courtesy name of Wumajun. Wumajun and Feng Jin have a good relationship. TSK, TSK, TSK. I feel like my heart is broken. Why is Feng Jin here? Jiang Pengji saw the change in Lu Shi's expression. Although he hated Feng Jin, he didn't seem to recognize his voice. Outside the door, Wumajun frowned. He was dissatisfied with Feng Jin's behavior. Feng Jin was always against him. No matter what he said, Feng Jin could refute him. It was annoying and disgusting. The more Feng Jin objected, the more rebellious he became. He pushed aside the brothel keeper with one hand, ignored her pleading eyes, and pushed the door open. The girls who were singing stopped because of the commotion. The 2 groups of people outside and inside the door looked at each other in silence. Feng Jin, Wumajun, Jiang Pengji was not affected at all. She smiled and said, "Sisters, why did you stop?" The faces of the women who were playing and singing stiffened, but they quickly returned to their working state. Their voices were a little soft, sweet, and sticky. It was as if they could penetrate into one's heart. Jiang Pengji was not used to it at first, but after listening to it for a while, she felt that it was quite nice and charming. Even though Feng Jin and Wumajun didn't know Lu Shi, they knew Jiang Pengji, Lu Shi's son, Lu Shi. At this moment, it was a little awkward. He cupped his hands and said, "Cough, cough, cough. I didn't know it was Lu Langjun in the room. Please forgive me for being rude." Wumajun had the intention to win Jiang Pengji over to his side. Now that he had made such a big mistake, how could he not find a way to make up for it? Feng Jin felt even more awkward and uncomfortable. Were his eyes playing tricks on him? The man who had 2 beauties on his left and right, who was teasing 2 girls and laughing so hard, was Lu Shi. A real warrior dared to face the fact that his female companions were drinking and hugging women in the brothel. Feng Jin was slightly embarrassed. Jiang Pengji gestured for him to step into the room. Wumajun entered as well. "Huayu, let me introduce you." Jiang Pengji did not think that the atmosphere was not awkward enough. She called out Feng Jin's courtesy name. Of course, Feng Jin did not realize that something was wrong. Close friends always called each other by their courtesy names. However, he did not realize the identity of the man sitting in front of him. Lu Shi, Feng Huayu. Feng Jin looked like he was all ears, but when Jiang Pengji said the first sentence, he could not take it anymore. "This is my father." Feng Jin, Lu Shi's father, was Hejin's Lu Shi or Hu County Chief Lu Zhongqing. So. He quietly turned his head to look at Lu Shi, only to find that Lu Shi was also looking at him coldly. What kind of experience was it to be caught in Yingchun House by his father's good friend? Feeling hopeless smiley face 3, Feng Jin braced himself and said, "Uncle Lu. Jiang Pengji did not seem to notice it. She continued to introduce, "Father, this is Feng Jin, whom I mentioned to you before." Lu Shi took a sip of tea and maintained his sitting posture. He did not even raise his eyebrows. He softly responded, "Yes." Wu Majun's face was twisted. His joy was mixed with fear and panic. He indeed wanted to rope in Lu Zhongqing, but in his plan, he should have paid Lu Zhongqing a visit himself, generously dissecting his own talents and abilities, using his own charisma to pull Lu Zhongqing over to his side and obtain political support. But the result? Their first meeting, Ingchun House. Lu Shi's son. Although Dongqing's officialdom strictly forbade officials from having sex, Lu Shi's position was different from others. This was Hejian County, which was far away from the emperor. No one could use this to shake his position. If they did, there would be no officials in the whole of Dongqing. This is Huai Yu's good friend, Wu Majun. His courtesy name is Shengzi. Jiang Pengji was probably the only one who could maintain a good mood and enjoy the show. She, a pure woman, was having fun, while the three men looked at each other. The atmosphere was so awkward that it made people feel like they were about to explode. Feng Jin, who had always been eloquent, was now sitting obediently in his seat. His posture was obviously very standard, but in Jiang Pengji's eyes, he was as delicate and pitiful as a quail. He was trembling with fear and was truly quiet like a chicken. She looked around and realized that Lu Shi did not seem to be controlling his aura at all. Jiang Pengji added fuel to the fire. "Huaiyu, do you want me to call a wife over?" Feng Jin secretly glared at her. His meaning was obvious. Was she trying to kill him? Lu Shi looked down and spoke like an elder talking to a junior. "Huaiyu, are you married?" Feng Jin broke into a cold sweat. He was not afraid of Lu Shi, but he was afraid that the news would spread to his family. Even though he had only accompanied Wu Majun and had never done anything out of line, no one would believe him. Feng Jin said respectfully, "I'm still young. I'm not married yet." "Not engaged?" Lu Shi continued to ask. He did not care about Wu Majun. After all, he did not know Wu Majun well. He did not like Wu Majun's father, the current emperor of Dongqing. Feng Jin calmed down. He felt that Lu Shi was going to say something. Not engaged yet. In Dongqing, there were many 16-year-old noblemen like Feng Jin who were not engaged yet. He was talented and good-looking. He could make a name for himself before he turned 20. By then, his social status would be different. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was young and talented. It would be better to talk about marriage. Jiang Pengji secretly glanced at Lu Shi. She was afraid that he would say something about Feng Jin marrying into the Lu family. After all, Lu Shi's drunken words left a deep impression on her. Chapter 99. Feng Jin's eyelids twitched. Xianda was his father's courtesy name. Although he was a junior, he had heard that Lu Shi and Feng Ren were close. As for the words, "he has a daughter," Feng Jin was shocked. He was like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bow. However, he had always been smart. He knew that Jiang Pengji's identity as a female was a secret. Few people knew about it, and Lu Shi had no intention of revealing it. Therefore, Lu Shi only had one son. His mistress's daughter was not worthy of Feng Jin's identity. Therefore, he was just being polite. Therefore, Feng Jin did not have to worry that he would be like Jiang Pengji in the future, strong and masculine. Although he did not expect to have a mistress after marriage, he did not want to fight all day. He would still be the one getting beaten up. "Your nephew appreciates uncle's kindness. Even if we can't become in-laws, I and Lanting are close friends. We are better than brothers." Then, Feng Jin secretly looked at Jiang Pengji for help. He hoped that his friend could help him attract some attention. "I often hear Xianda praise you three brothers. You all have the talent to be a king. If my useless son could be 3 times as capable as you brothers, I wouldn't have to worry about him in the future." Lu Shi said derogatory words about Jiang Pengji, but his expression showed otherwise. Although Feng Jin was not as sweet as his younger brother, he did know how to read people's faces. Uncle, you flatter me. My father scolded me for being stupid and not being flexible. How can I be a king? As for Lanting, although I haven't known her for long, I can see that she has a good mind. She is not as mediocre as you said. He had belittled himself and flattered Jiang Pengji. He secretly wiped the sweat off his forehead. He hoped that the troublesome Uncle Lu would let him go. It was a small matter to be put in a difficult position now. What he was afraid of was that one day he would write to his father and spill the beans. Jiang Pengji looked at the interaction between the two coldly. She snorted softly and turned to talk to Wuma Jun. Is Wuma Langjun also here to seek pleasure? At first, Wuma Jun was quite happy that Jiang Pengji was willing to take the initiative to talk to him to ease the awkward situation of him being ignored. However, she asked such a shameful question, which made him feel a little regretful. It would have been better if he had been ignored. No matter how he answered this question, it didn't seem to work. If he admitted that he was here to have fun, wouldn't that be smearing his own name and causing Lu Zhongqing's first impression of him to fall to rock bottom? If he denied it, it would be even worse. As a man, he dared to take responsibility for his actions. How could he not dare to admit such a small matter? If he didn't have the guts and backbone, what great things could he achieve in the future? After going through the two answers in his mind, Wuma Jun chose to avoid answering because a direct answer would definitely be wrong. I came with Huayu, but why is Lanting here? With that, he could not help but sweep his gaze over the two women, and a wave of displeasure rose in his heart. It was not that he valued the two prostitutes, but he was unhappy that no one had asked for his permission and had touched his people. Even if that person was the son of Lu Zhongqing, whom he wanted to rope in, he still did not like it. However, Wuma Jun would not show his emotions. Instead, he buried them deeper, making it hard for others to see through them. Of course, that did not include Jiang Pengji. Of course, my father brought me here. She told the truth and ignored Wuma Jun's ugly expression, as if he had eaten a fly. He was worried that I would be too curious and would not be able to resist other people's instigation. Instead of that, it would be better for him to bring me here personally to broaden my horizons. The more he tried to stop it, the easier it would cause reverse psychology. If he showed it openly, it would be easier for people to lose interest and treat him with a normal attitude. Wuma Jun could not wrap his head around it. What was the connection between the two? Even so, according to the power of the Lu family, what kind of women can't they get? Why bother to come to such a chaotic place? Wuma Jun did not understand. In his opinion, a normal man would hint to his wife and ask her to arrange a servant girl for his child. What kind of father would bring his son to a brothel? He had never seen or heard of such a thing. Jiang Pengji suddenly smiled. You should not ask me this question. You should ask those who indulge in sensual pleasures and linger in the southern courtyard of the brothel. In terms of wealth and power, they are much more powerful than me. Why do they like to come to this kind of place? Wuma Jun's face froze. At that moment, the pretty girl who was half leaning on Jiang Pengji's shoulder smiled foolishly. Lang Jun, why do you think so? Of course, because the flowers at home are not as fragrant as wild flowers. A legitimate wife, a legitimate concubine, these were all things that were already in the bag. If you want to have sex, you can do it at any time, but the women outside are different. Only those that you can't have are worth thinking about, Jiang Pengji said calmly. There was no longer a smile on her face. She looked at Wuma Jun with sarcasm in her eyes. If the two women had not come to the private room but waited for Wuma Jun obediently, he would have been forgotten after a few times. The main reason he refused to let go of the matter was that he had been humiliated. It had nothing to do with the two women. Don't you think I'm right, Master Wuma? Lu Shi had been paying attention to the situation. He laughed and scolded, what sense? It's all a bunch of twisted logic. Twisted logic is still logic. It's just not as straightforward as other logic. After that, she turned to the girl beside her and whispered something in her ear. The girl's cheeks suddenly turned red. Lang Jun, please come with me. Jiang Pengji stood up and flicked her sleeves. She casually tilted her head and said to Lu Shi, Father, please enjoy your conversation. I won't stay any longer. After that, she followed the two girls out of the private room and went to one of the boudoirs. Lu Shi was speechless. Lu Shi was not the only one who was dumbfounded. Even though Jiang Pengji did not say it explicitly, they could understand what she was hinting at. Was he going to sleep in the same bed with the two girls? 3 girls together? While Feng Jin's nerves were out of control, he secretly observed Lu Shi's expression. But the older, the wiser. If Lu Shi was the kind of rookie who showed his emotions and was seen through by the younger generation, he would not be able to stay in Dongqing's officialdom. Feng Jin could not read the slightest emotion from Lu Shi's face. He could not help but feel suspicious. Could it be that Uncle Lu did not know that Lanting was a girl? Feng Jin suddenly felt awkward. If Lu Shi really did not know and he took the initiative to tell Lu Shi, it would be a despicable act. Apart from that, he could not explain how he knew that Lu Shi was a girl. He could not say that it was a dark and windy night when Lu Shi escaped from the bandits' lair. Her clothes were messy and a corner of her dudu was exposed. Her hair was messy at that time, and it showed that she was a girl. If he dared to say that, he would be courting death. What if Lu Shi asked him to take responsibility for Lu Shi's reputation? Chapter 100. Feng Jin was in a dilemma. Elsewhere, Jiang Pengji arrived at one of the ladies' chambers. The furnishings in the room were warm and elegant, and every corner was filled with the aura of a young girl. You're not feeling well. Drink some sweet water and go to bed early. Jiang Pengji smiled at the pretty girl, Xia, and said gently, or should I ask someone to bring you some blood-enriching soup? Xia's eyes lit up, and she looked at Jiang Pengji. Huh? Xia thought Jiang Pengji was there for fun, but she didn't expect her to say that. Chun was at a loss as well. It's your period. Why don't you pay attention? Jiang Pengji said with a smile, don't drink alcohol or eat cold food for the next few days. Period. The two girls looked at each other. Maybe it was psychological, but Xia felt a slight pain in her lower abdomen after hearing Jiang Pengji's words. There was a faint warmth flowing down her lower body. Her face turned red and white, and she didn't know how to react. Jiang Pengji didn't know how women in this era dealt with their periods, but it wasn't easy. I don't know how you girls deal with such situations, so I brought you both here. I'll have to trouble you, Chun, to help her out. The faint smell of blood on Xia's body grew stronger, and her fair face turned red under Jiang Pengji's gaze. Most women in the brothel had irregular periods, and many of them had minor problems that they were ashamed of. Xia, for example, had irregular periods every month. When she felt pain, her limbs would turn cold, and even her molars would hurt. She tried to sit properly, but even the slightest movement caused her to twitch in pain, which made her shy and anxious. Jiang Pengji looked at the two girls' reactions and took the initiative to sit behind the screen. She blocked the camera in the streaming room from her view. Aya Jiaodong, I thought the host would have sex with the girl. I didn't expect her to be on her period _ smiley face 3, angle, _ Fanghua Jiu. I want to repent. When the host left the private room with the girl, I thought there was going to be an erotic scene. I didn't expect it to be for this. Although it's different from what I imagined, the host is super gentle. I wish I had a boyfriend like the host. 1,000 years of parting Wujiang Jia Kai, same repentance plus 1 Yixiao Qingcheng, I'm in a daze. Although I know it's inhumane to laugh at this time, if the host was a man, he would probably be depressed. Just as he was about to have some fun with the girl, she was on her period, she would definitely vomit blood out of depression. Jiang Pengji sat behind the screen. There was a tea table beside her. She poured herself a cup and raised her eyebrows. Host V, that's not right. That's a smile. If I were a man, I might not be depressed and vomit blood in such a situation. After all, there were still the eastern and western palaces to relieve my worries. If Thumbelina wasn't up to it, he could still be a little more beastly, such as jade blood-cleansing silver snatch. Of course, this kind of behavior was too demented. Hee, a bunch of rookies still wanted to compete with her in dirty jokes. Jiang Pengji was surprised and took a sip of tea leisurely. The style of the bullet screen had completely changed. Qinxiu Yubi Wujiang Zhatsai, my streamer is amazing. I didn't expect you to be such a filthy, sick streamer. Sunset Sun, sob 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 sob, old driver is driving the train over there. What did you hear? Tudu Feiqiu, filthy voice. Lovelorn Front Lianmeng, I'm speechless. I can't believe I'm watching a female streamer act like a hooligan _ smiley face 3, angle _ Bai Gue Yeshing, so what if she's a hooligan? If my boyfriend could be like the streamer, no, at least 1/10 of her, I could have sex with him every day. I'd be unhappy if she didn't act like a hooligan. You don't understand, it's better to f*ck her back. Jiang Pengji always complained that she had 3,000 veterans in her streaming room, but she never thought that birds of a feather flocked together. Different streamers would attract different kinds of viewers. She was an experienced veteran, so how could she complain that others were too filthy? Jiang Pengji glanced at the bullet screen of Bai Gue Yeshing and thought about it carefully. It was so meaningful. Time passed quietly as people watched the bullet screen and drank tea. The rustling sound of clothes rubbing against each other came from behind the screen, and it gradually quieted down. Not long after, the screen was quietly pushed open. Xia had changed into a new set of clothes, but her face was still flushed. Lang Jun, I'm not feeling well today. I'm afraid I can't serve you. Shun continued, if you don't mind my appearance, then. Jiang Pengji smiled and shook her head. The other person's face turned pale. I'm afraid you've misunderstood me. I didn't mean that. Jiang Pengji raised her hand and gestured for them to sit down. Her expression was still gentle. I feel happy and satisfied to be able to look at you two like this. If I do anything else, wouldn't I be desecrating this beauty? It's easy to get love, but it's hard to find a true friend. Both of them were young. They had been bought by the brothel keeper when they were young and trained. They had been prostitutes for a few years. What kind of people had they not seen? Whether it was true or false, it couldn't be hidden from their eyes. Everyone said that whores were heartless and entertainers were heartless. Wasn't it because they had long seen through the hypocrisy of others? How could it be so easy to exchange false feelings for true feelings? Especially the true feelings of prostitutes who had seen through the affairs of the world? What kind of sweet words had they not heard in their daily lives? They just listened to it and didn't take it seriously. But when it came from Jiang Pengji, they subconsciously chose to believe it. When they came back to their senses, they didn't feel that it was wrong. The older Xia smiled bitterly. Lang Jun, you're flattering me. I'm just a broken flower. How can I deserve such praise? People say that beauty is in the bones, not the skin, but I think beauty is in the heart, not the bones. Looks are given by one's parents. No one can choose, but character and temperament are acquired. Both of you have a pure heart in the mortal world. How can you not be beautiful? Jiang Pengji wasn't just praising them. She had her reasons. Most of the women in the brothel had been raised since they were young. Except for a few who were born beautiful and had great potential, most of them were used as maids. They were beaten and scolded at every turn. They were at the bottom of the food chain in the brothel. Not only did they have to face all kinds of customers who made things difficult for them and took advantage of them, but they also had to endure the torture of the women they served. If they were unlucky enough to meet some violent ones, they might lose their lives. Jiang Pengji had a sensitive sense of smell. When she passed by the maids in the hall, she smelled the fragrance of medicine on them, Although their steps were steady, their balance was not natural. It meant that they were injured and had been treated with medicine. Jiang Pengji wasn't familiar with the medicine in this world, so she couldn't smell the ingredients. But one of the medicines was the second lady's decoction. It wasn't very expensive, but it wasn't something that a maid like her could use. If the maids were valued enough to use medicine, why would the brothel allow the customers to humiliate them? It didn't make sense. If it wasn't from the brothel, then where did it come from? When Jiang Pengji smelled the fragrance of Chun-Er's makeup, she got the answer. When she arrived, she saw that there was a wooden box in the corner that had not been completely covered, and this small question was solved. Chapter 101. Lang Jun is so young, but you're already so good at sweet talking. When you grow up, I wonder how many girls you'll disappoint. Love Go Little Say Net W. Chuxia held the handkerchief in her hand and used it to cover her lips. Even someone like me is tempted, much less the other girls. Jiang Pengji had always been able to tell the difference between truth, lies, and jokes. Miss Xia, you're wrong. Even if it's sweet talking, there's still a difference. Jiang Pengji continued, to me, all the beautiful girls in the world are as precious as jade plates. Of course, they should be treated with the utmost respect. My sweet talking is from the bottom of my heart, and it's not frivolous at all. As for other men, if they have bad intentions, even if they can name a flower, they'll still be acting like a hooligan. As soon as she finished speaking, the two girls were amused. They felt as if they had eaten honey. Just as Jiang Pengji said, her words were from the bottom of her heart. That was why they were so touching. Even though the two girls were used to romance, they were still affected. However, they had seen many modest but arrogant gentry. It was the first time they saw one who liked to boast so much. It was a little funny. Xia laughed and said, yes, yes, yes. Lang Jun is a gentleman. Rimu Xiang, life is lovely. JPG. Mama asked me why I kneeled to watch the stream _ smiley face 3, angle, _ Qianqiubi Wujiang Zhatsai. I also kneeled to watch the stream. If I had the streamer's skills, why would I still be single? Jiang Pengji smiled and took the tea made by Xia. Although the ingredients were not as expensive as the ones in the loos, the taste was more exquisite. Love Go Little Say Net W. Chuxi felt her body heat up as soon as she took a sip. It warmed her heart and drove away the coldness of early spring. Host V. Qianqiubi Wujiang Zhatsai, that's not right. I've always been single. It didn't mean that she could get rid of her single status. For example, she had a bunch of close friends and brothers, but none of them had developed a relationship. After all, not everyone could endure days without any secrets. The pressure was too great. Qinxiu Yubi Wujiang Zha Kai, oh no. After hearing what the host said, I feel like I'm going to be single until I die. In the eyes of many live stream viewers, the prostitutes in the brothels were all prostitutes. Other than stripping and having sex, they seemed to have no other skills. On the other hand, Chun and Xia had taught them a harsh lesson. They knew what it meant to be proficient in the 4 arts. Other than these skills, they were also proficient in the classics and history books. One should know that the literacy rate was so low that it was scary. When he played other musical instruments, he had the demeanor of a master of accumulating points. Under Jiang Pengji's secret guidance, the whole streaming room was in a state of Host V. Some viewers despised them before, but I just want to say that those viewers don't even have the right to despise them. How could the self-restraint of the 4 arts compare to others? In your era, you would be a top student at the very least. They are not very talented, but in order to survive, they try their best to learn and enrich themselves. This in itself is worthy of respect. Do you have the right to despise them? In my opinion, there is nothing to criticize about them, including the means that you despise to survive by selling your bodies. Jiang Pengji still did not understand where some people in the streaming room got their sense of superiority from. Indeed, there was a generation gap. Rimu Xiang, that makes some sense. I suddenly thought of some old jokes about transmigration. The female protagonist must go to a brothel to perform a modern hit song and dance, and then people will be shocked. It's funny now that I think about it. After all, the two eras are not only separated by time and space, but also by culture. Some people agreed with Jiang Pengji's opinion, but naturally, there were also people who disagreed. Dolly Buting, a prostitute is a prostitute. No matter how talented she is, she still depends on being f***ked for money. No matter how nice it sounds, she is still a whore. What do you mean, host? When people mock you, you act like your tail was stepped on and you can't wait to whitewash yourself. I can guess that you used to be in this kind of business, right? These days, all kinds of lowly people can transmigrate and become a lady from a rich family. With a change of body, people can't smell your pretentious aura. Jiang Pengji read the comments, but the smile on her face did not disappear. It was not that she had good self-restraint. In fact, her temper had always been terrible. It was just that people could not see the bullet screen in the streaming room. If she suddenly lost her temper, it would definitely scare Xia and Chun, who were sitting beside her. It would not be good to scare beautiful women for the sake of a few ignorant people. She was too lazy to pay attention to them, lest she lowered her status. Facts speak louder than words. She would make them shut up. Time seems to pass very quickly when I'm with Lang Jun. Xia held a cup of wuhong soup that Jiang Pengji had specially ordered. She drank it, which greatly relieved the pain in her abdomen. Her pale face became a little rosier, and her eyes became more watery. Jiang Pengji heard the sound of the night watch outside and silently calculated the time. If you don't mind, can I come visit often? When it comes to poetry, even many of my classmates are not as accomplished as you two ladies. Jiang Pengji smiled sincerely. She said she would come to visit, and she really meant it. If the court allows women to become officials, with your talents, you two will definitely be able to get a seat. When that time comes, you might even be able to become officials of the same court. Jiang Pengji's last sentence was mostly a joke, but the first sentence was a real compliment. Xia blushed, but her eyes were clear. She said, Lang Jun, you're making fun of me. I only read classics and history when I'm free. How can I compare to your classmates? Moreover, this is a brothel. Lang Jun, you have a beautiful woman in your backyard, so you should stay away from this place. Rima Xieyang, the host's charm can even tempt the ladies in the brothel _ smiley face 3, angle, _ Chinchio Yubi Wujiang Jia Kai. I know why the host doesn't want to be single. It must be so that others can't be single. Flirting with all the ladies and raising their standards of choosing a husband, so that most men can't be single. How sinister. Fang Huajiu, host, can you get that idiot Dali to stop talking? He's so noisy that I can't watch the stream. Host V, if others want to bark like dogs and show off their manners, why should we stop them? The audience was speechless. What she said made sense, and they were speechless. Ladies, why do you have to belittle yourselves? Jiang Pengji said with a smile, just wait and see. Maybe in the future, women will really become officials and enter the court. Xia and Chun were both focused on the word wife, and did not pay much attention to the latter part of the sentence. Women entering the court as officials? It might have been possible during the period of the 16 Kingdoms or the early years of the Xia dynasty. However, during the Xia dynasty, more and more women were confined to their chambers and backyards. In the current 5 kingdoms, the phenomenon was getting more and more serious. It was even said that in Zhongzhou, which was the most powerful country in China, women could no longer show their faces in public or remarry. At home, their father was the king. After marriage, their husband was the king. If their husband died, their son would be the king. If they lost their virginity, they would drown. If they went out, they would be accused of indecency. Chapter 102. Lang Juan's mouth is so sweet that it has entered my heart. A hoarse old woman's voice came from the door. Jiang Pengji frowned, and Chun-Er thought she was unhappy. Why would anyone disturb us at this hour? Nothing out of the ordinary happened, but to outsiders, the two ladies had entered the room to serve her. Normally, no one would disturb them. Otherwise, what if the guests were to be interrupted when they were in high spirits? What would they do if they became impotent? Xia stood up and smiled. Lang Jun, don't be angry. I'll go take a look. As he finished speaking, he folded his sleeves and left. The sound of the door being pushed open could be heard, followed by Xia's doubtful reply. After a while, Xia came in with a bitter smile. She said in a low voice, that was the maid who cleaned the courtyard. She said that a girl ran away. The pimps in the building couldn't catch her. Someone suspects that she is hiding in one of the ladies' rooms. Is that why we have to search your room? Jiang Pengji frowned. She knew very well whether there was another person in the room. If we don't search it, people will gossip. Xia sighed. Because she was clean, she was asked to serve the mysterious guest, Wu Majun. Her life was more comfortable than the other ladies in the brothel. However, it made the top courtesan unhappy. She might want to humiliate Jiang Pengji. Did the brothel keeper agree to it? Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and sneered. She knows I'm in this room, but she still asked her to come in. Isn't she trying to spoil the fun? I don't care. I can't be calculative with a brothel keeper. But in the end, you are the one who will suffer. Chun-Er and Xia looked embarrassed. Jiang Pengji said cheerfully, let the maid in. You two stay here and don't move. Don't let anyone disturb you. After getting permission, the maid led two men in gray linen clothes and green headscarves into the room. They rummaged through the room. The noise outside was getting louder. Xia and Chun-Er looked terrified. It's okay. Don't panic. After a while, the commotion finally died down. Jiang Pengji stood up and walked out of the screen. She looked at the hunchbacked old woman and asked, Old lady, did you find anyone? The old maid bowed slightly and smiled. Her brown face looked a little greasy under the candlelight. There was a big black mole at the corner of her mouth, which made her look a little wretched. I'm sorry to disturb you. I didn't find anyone. I'll go down now. Jiang Pengji nodded, indicating that she could lead them away. This old maid is so rude. How could she make the room so messy? Although Chun had a good temper, she was still a little angry when she saw the makeup and hairpins that had been messed up on the dressing table. When she thought of how the old woman and the two pimps had touched her rouge and face powder, and how dirty it was, she suddenly felt nauseous. Check to see if anything is missing. Xia said gently, Mom always suspects us of hiding money. She knows all the places in this building that are suitable for hiding money. She might take this opportunity to let the old maid come in and take the money away. That reminded Chun-Er, but she didn't dare to get up when she thought about Jiang Pengji in the room. Don't worry. Nothing is missing. Jiang Pengji looked around and said with a smile, but there are some things that shouldn't be there. Chun-Er blinked. Lang Jun, you said nothing is missing. What is there? Yes. Jiang Pengji walked around the room twice and took out two green scented sachets from a place that the two ladies didn't know about. Which dirty man does this scented sachet belong to? Xia took a look and thought it was something dirty, so she threw it aside. That's not the main point. The things inside are interesting. Jiang Pengji opened the scented sachet and put some strange dried plants inside. She took some out and sniffed it. She frowned and said, Lady Chun, you know how to make scented medicine. Do you know the effects of these things? Before Chun-Er was sold to Yingchun brothel, she was the daughter of a doctor. Because of her father's occupation, she knew some medicine. The two ladies looked at each other when they heard Jiang Pengji call them. They stepped forward and examined the scented sachet. They found it familiar. Don't sniff it for too long. It's bad for your brain. Jiang Pengji grabbed Chun Er's fair wrist. I don't know what this medicine is, but it has the effect of confusing one's mind. If you smell it for too long, it's extremely easy to cause your mind to become muddled, your thoughts to be muddled, and you won't know what's going on. Chun Er threw the scented sachet back when she heard that. She suddenly remembered something and her face turned red. She spat on the scented sachet and scolded, "Which shameless bastard put this in here? It's one thing for the ladies in the brothel to serve their customers, but how dare those eunuchs covet you? How shameless." Jiang Pengji realized that the scented sachet was probably the knockout drug of this era. Xia Er gritted her teeth and looked terrified. It must have been those two pimps who released it. Once they entered the brothel, they would be humiliated for the rest of their lives. She had heard other ladies talk about how the pimps who worked in the brothel bullied them. Jiang Pengji smiled. Did the pimps do it? Not necessarily. Host V, something interesting seems to be happening. Are you guys still sleepy? Do you want to watch a good show? Yimi Yangguang, eh? Did you find something? Ichi Sanqing, I'm confused, but you're still keeping us guessing. You're so bad. Hongjun Laozu de Jua, I feel like you're trying to stir up trouble. Count me in. I'll watch your stream all night. Huaqua de Jua, you're a real man who's destined to stir up trouble. Hongjun Laozu de Jua, TSK. To be precise, the trouble has already been ruined by you. The audience in the streaming room was excited to watch the show. Jiang Pengji had also made a decision. She turned to the two ladies and said, "You should rest early, especially Xia Er. Be careful these few days and eat less cold food. Don't be greedy and harm your health. If I'm free, I'll visit you again. If there's any trouble, you can find me at the Lu residence." Fang Huajiao, I feel like these two ladies are to your liking. Why don't you save them from this hell? Jiang Pengji glanced at the bullet screen and met Xia Er's eyes. She nodded at her and said goodbye. Why not? Host V, probably because I can't save them. There are countless prostitutes who are more pitiful than them. If I want to save any of them, how can I save all of them? To really save them, you can't just take them away from here. You have to rebuild their broken backs. To really save them, you have to change the root cause of their current situation. Maybe she could do it. Chapter 103. Jiang Pengji was stunned for a moment when she saw the words soft-hearted and kind-hearted. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Host V, it's the first time someone said I'm soft-hearted and kind-hearted. That was the judgment of the viewers who were separated by a dimensional screen. Because the images they saw were what she wanted them to see, they were easily misled by subjective emotions. But what kind of person was Jiang Pengji in reality? They would find out soon enough. Yimi Yangguang, host, you said you were going to watch a good show. Where is it? Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes and opened the sandalwood fan in her hand. A sly smile blossomed on her face. Host V, don't stop. Watch carefully. You'll be glad that we're separated by a dimensional distance. After sending the bullet screen, Jiang Pengji ignored the viewers who were dumbfounded. She made a detour to the backyard of Ingchun brothel, climbed over the wall, and nimbly hid in the shadows cast by the eaves. She adjusted her breathing rate and controlled her breathing movements to minimize her presence. The viewers in the streaming room were dumbfounded. Jiang Pengji thought about it and asked the system to turn on the infrared camera system at night. From her angle, she could see the corner door of the backyard. Because there was a small artificial hill nearby, the light couldn't penetrate it. As a result, the corner door was unusually dark. Yimi Yangguang, this is what the backyard of a brothel looks like. People come and go. It's quite lively. Now, is the streamer looking for someone here? They're all unfamiliar faces. What's so interesting about it? After waiting quietly for a while, just when everyone's patience was about to run out, a few sneaky figures walked out of the back hall. With the help of the ultra-clear streaming camera, the viewers in the streaming room could clearly see the figures. Some of the viewers who were watching the stream recognized them immediately. Wasn't that the old woman who led the pimps to search Chun-Er's room? As they were thinking about it, the old woman bent her back and lowered her head to talk to the two pimps. The three of them seemed to be chatting happily. Jiang Pengji looked at them coldly. The two pimps looked around. One of them took a small silver coin from the old woman's hand. They didn't care that the silver coin was dirty. They put it in their hands and bit it hard. Then they took it out to check if it was real or fake. Then, the two pimps looked at each other and waved at the old maid. They separated in different directions. The old maid rubbed her hands against the corner of her linen clothes and continued to hunch her back. She quietly opened the corner door and walked to the alley separated by a wall from the backyard. The audience was puzzled. What was going on? Following that, some of the audience members tried to make guesses after connecting what had happened. Qianshan Mushue, are the three of them splitting the loot? He secretly embezzled the hard-earned money of the prostitutes in the brothel. He felt like a blood-sucking bug. Tout de fait, based on my understanding of the host, things are definitely not that simple. Didn't she say that she didn't want to stop just now? She probably wanted to do something to teach you a lesson. Think about the last time she beat a servant to death. Although most of the audience in the streaming room were novices and it was the first time for many of them to enter the streaming room, the video of Jiang Pengji's previous streaming had been spread on the public platform of their dimension. The most bloody video was censored after it was broadcasted. The censored video was the content of the servant being beaten to death. Dolly Buting, haha, I'm not scared. Come at me if you have the ability, bitch. Although the bullet screen was very tough, the audience felt that it was a bluff. At that moment, some of the audience could not help but come back to their senses and dig out what Jiang Pengji had said before. You will be glad that you and I are separated by a dimension, this host is going to tear apart her own audience again? Host V, you are thinking too much. You are not that important. At most, you are just a bonus. Not everyone is qualified for her revenge. Don't think too highly of yourself. While the audience was guessing, the old maid had already turned into the alley. Jiang Pengji got up and chased after her. Stepping on the eaves and walls, she was relaxed and natural as if she was taking a stroll in the park. Not long after, the audience in the streaming room heard a rustling sound coming from the deep alley. With the convenience of the infrared camera at night, the scene in the deep alley was clearly displayed in front of them. Yimi Yangguang, damn, host, are you serious? You want us to watch an old woman take off her clothes and see her naked body? In the deep alley, the old maid with a hunched back was taking off her heavy linen clothes one by one. They thought they would see a high-energy scene, but they soon realized that something was wrong. She was wearing too many clothes, wasn't she? As she took off her clothes one by one, the hunched and bloated old maid gradually became thin, until she took off her hair cap, revealing her tightly tied black hair. Only then did the audience realize that she was not an old maid at all. Qianshan Mushue, is this the legendary magical disguise technique? It's even more magical than plastic surgery here. They witnessed the whole process of a hunched and bloated old maid turning into a skinny middle-aged man. When he wiped off the greasy brown unknown substance on his face, a sharp mouth and monkey cheeks were revealed, and a pair of slender rat eyes were particularly bright in the dark night. His face was no longer brown, but it looked like he had been drinking too much. After stuffing the disguise into the gray bag one by one, the man adjusted his clothes, pinched the heavy money bag hanging on his waist, and revealed a satisfied smile. Humming a tune, the man strode out of the deep alley with his head held high. He did not notice that there was a pair of cold eyes staring at him from the wall. Looking at the direction he was going, he should be going to the main entrance of Ingchun brothel. Jiang Pengji sneered. The man heard the noise and turned his head abruptly. He shouted, "Who's there?" "No one." The man frowned. He could not help but wonder if he was being paranoid and had an illusion. However, the next moment, something fell on his back. Before he could turn around, he felt a sharp pain in his neck. Staring at the unconscious man for a while, she said with slight disappointment, "It's a small fish." She grabbed the back of the man's collar with one hand and easily dragged him into the deep alley. Squatting beside the man, Jiang Pengji frowned. The audience in the streaming room held their breath, afraid to disturb her thoughts. After a while, she pulled out a snow-white handkerchief from the man's lapel. There was a snow-white and delicate lotus embroidered on it. The owner of the handkerchief was not an adult woman, but an unmarried girl. She was about 10 years old and was not a prostitute. Jiang Pengji closed her eyes slightly and searched for a small bag on the man's waist. There were 7 pearls of the same size and shape. Chapter 104. Looking at what she had found, Jiang Pengji's eyebrows were almost twisted into a knot. She looked at the man with an unfriendly gaze, as if he was not a living person in her eyes, but a corpse that had already turned cold. Love goes small show on net w, chew on the side. The audience in the streaming room was so curious that they wanted to climb out of the screen and shake her shoulders. Don't keep us guessing. Jiang Pengji did not seem to notice the anxiety of the audience. Instead, she raised her hand and untied the belt around the man's waist. She took out something that was wrapped in something hard from his clothes. She squeezed it, and the texture was as she had guessed. She opened it and saw that it was a small roll of bamboo slips. Hongjun Laozu's Juhua, host, what are the words on it? Sorcerer's Girl Afeng, I remember that it should be some people's names. I also saw some words like XX Lane. I guess it should be a record of where someone lives and their age. But I don't know what the super ugly lines at the bottom mean. Is it a secret of some mysterious organization in the host's hands? Meishu's warrior Iun, I envy those who are knowledgeable. I used to know astronomy and geography, but after 4 years in university, I feel like I've become illiterate smiley face 3, angle, host. I only know 2 words on this bamboo slip. I'm sorry, my language teacher. Jiang Pengji pursed her lips. At that moment, the man who had fainted slowly woke up. Before he could raise his hand to rub the sore spot, he suddenly saw a dark figure squatting beside him. He almost rolled and crawled 2 steps backward. However, he soon found that his belt had been loosened, and his loose pants were no longer tied. As he crawled, he quickly took off his pants below his buttocks, revealing a patch of white. When the night wind blew, it was so cold that he could not help but shiver. At that moment, the monkey-like man could not help but want to cry. He thought that he had only met a robber, but he did not expect that the other party wanted to rob him of his body. Everything happened so suddenly that the audience in the streaming room could not react at all. Their vision was already blocked by a large patch of white. Hongjun Laozu's chrysanthemum, damn, although I have such an ID, I'm really not interested in a man's chrysanthemum. Now, the streamer's driving skills are really unexpected. The dirty scenes are as fast as lightning. Qianshan Mushua, oh my, streamer, you're the death of me. My mom watched the stream with me, and now I'm kneeling on the ground. Jiang Pengji was also stunned. She had a disgusted expression on her face. She lifted her leg and kicked the man's left buttocks. The man fell forward like a dog eating its food. He even staggered and rolled twice. The stones on the ground rubbed against his face, leaving several bruises on his face. Being treated like this, the man suddenly felt a surge of anger in his heart. Without caring about fear, he rolled to the side and pulled some distance away. He grabbed his pants tightly with both hands, spat, and said fiercely, "Which idiot dares to rob me of my body?" Jiang Pengji was speechless. She didn't need to look to know that the live stream room would be full of ha 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 and use this as a joke to mock her. Hee, rob me? Hearing this, Jiang Pengji felt as if her fingers had touched the snot of an unknown person. The cold and sticky feeling spread from her fingertips to her whole body. She had goosebumps, which disgusted her. You don't deserve it. He thought it was a homeless man or a desperado who wanted to rob him, but when he heard the voice coming from the darkness, he was startled. That clear and clean voice automatically made the general outline of a handsome young man appear in his mind. Nowadays, men were very popular. The business of places like the South Yard Luoguan was even better than the brothels. In the man's mind, he subconsciously recalled his little lover in the South Courtyard's brothel. Not to mention that her body was soft and delicate, her soft and tender skin was extremely good to the touch. Her taste was even more memorable than some clean virgins. For a moment, his courage firmly suppressed the fear and anger in his heart. Oh, it's a young Lang Jun. Listening to this voice, I don't even need to look at the person. My body is reacting. The man used the hemp rope he found at the last minute as a belt around his waist, but he didn't really run naked. Jiang Pengji's face became more and more gloomy. The man's vision was affected by the darkness, so he could only see a vague outline even with his eyes wide open. However, she could see the undisguised dirty expression on his face, which made her feel disgusted. If you told my brother earlier, he would definitely have sex with you. You wouldn't need to force yourself, relying on his age and height. The man seemed to be very fearless. He had a lot of good stuff on him, so he was not afraid of the young man with such a young voice and short stature. His reaction just now was because it was too sudden, and he was startled by it. Those who dare to tease me are either not born yet, dead, or on their way to die. Jiang Pengji held the wig that the man used to disguise himself as an old woman. She squeezed it into a ball and punched the man's face. Then she forced the wig into his mouth. At the same time, she hit the man's lower abdomen with her knee, causing a moment of numbness and loss of control of his limbs. No one knew better than Jiang Pengji what kind of force she used to hit which part of the body and what kind of reaction it would produce. Even if Lu Lanting had been a weakling in the past, she would still have been able to subdue him easily, let alone now. How disgusting. Jiang Pengji's wooden clogs were 3 inches below the man's navel. The unspeakable pain in his balls overtook the pain in his face and lower abdomen. The man curled up into a ball, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets, and the corners of his eyes were bloodshot. However, he couldn't scream because his mouth was still stuffed with the stinky wig. Saliva flowed out of the wig. Now, I had a feeling that the host crushed my balls and d*ck. It hurt so much. I was so scared that I stuffed Thumbelina into my pocket and felt my little friend. Now I'm being treated as a lunatic by my friends. Fatty Big C, that's nothing. Can you imagine the 8 of us touching each other's crotches? Paydaxing, I can't imagine the 8 of you touching each other's crotches. The male viewers felt like they had been hit by a critical hit, while the female viewers felt like it was a pain in the balls. Of course, the streaming room was a place where crooks and dragons mingled. Apart from those who had a peculiar style, there were other defenders who naturally criticized Jiang Pengji for being ruthless and having no morals. Among them, Don't Stop Dolly criticized her the most viciously. Chapter 105. I originally wanted to give you a quick death, but I didn't expect you to be so eager to go to hell. Jiang Pengji grabbed his collar with one hand and lifted him up easily. She said coldly, "If that's the case, I'll fulfill your wish." The man's face was already green and red from the pain. He didn't hear what Jiang Pengji said at all. His numb limbs didn't listen to him at all. However, I'm someone who likes to squeeze out every last bit of value from people. Since you're still useful, I'll allow you to live in luxury for a while longer. After she finished speaking, Jiang Pengji's eyes revealed a trace of ruthlessness. She quickly disappeared, as if she had never appeared. Host V, as a responsible host, I think it's not just about broadcasting some boring daily life. I also need to popularize some common sense knowledge to the audience, such as, how to make a stubborn duck tell the truth. Young man, have you heard of torture? Jiang Pengji's words piqued the curiosity of some of the more timid viewers. They were obviously scared to death and covered their eyes with their hands, but they still could not resist the curiosity in their hearts. They could not help but secretly open their fingers and peep through the gaps between their fingers to see what would happen next. In the Federation's dictionary, interrogation by torture was different from ordinary interrogation procedures. Those who knew the ropes would most likely shudder at the mention of it. Almost every federal soldier had mastered the essentials of interrogation by torture. As the leader of the army, it was impossible for Jiang Pengji not to learn this skill. Host V, of course, I don't recommend that you use it in real life, because it might kill someone. Host V, if one day you use this method in practice, please don't blame it on me. As she spoke, Jiang Pengji put a relatively clean handkerchief on her hands. Using the man as a teaching tool, she personally taught the live stream audience what a real professional interrogation was. On the surface, it was far less bloody than the so-called 10 great tortures, but in essence, it was more ruthless than those brutal punishments. Not only could it destroy the body, but it could also easily destroy the mind. Even a well-trained genetic warrior would not be able to withstand the full set of torture methods of the Federation, let alone a hooligan with a weak heart from ancient times. Jiang Pengji had only shown a little of her power, but the other party was already on the verge of collapsing. His consciousness was in a muddled state. She took out a flint and burned the handkerchief. The orange light illuminated half of her face. What's your name? Lin Xingdog. The man's eyes were unfocused, and the hair cover in his mouth had been removed. However, there was still a steady stream of turbid saliva flowing down the corner of his mouth. Some dripped onto his upper body, and some flowed down his neck to his collarbone. This scene could definitely drive a germaphobe crazy. Jiang Pengji narrowed her eyes. You're not a local. Where are you from? Meng County, Tsang Prefecture. The man tilted his head, and his limbs twitched from time to time. His gaze was blank, but his reply to Jiang Pengji was clear. Meng County, Tsang Prefecture. Jiang Pengji frowned and searched through Lu Lanting's memories for information about the place. The land of Dongqing was divided into 6 states and 21 counties. Sangzhou was one of the more prosperous states. Because the trade route to the north was smooth, it had close connections with the northern borderline. Many merchants went there to do business. Therefore, Sangzhou's economy was at the forefront of Dongqing. As for Meng County, it was the largest county in Tsang Prefecture and had the richest economy. Apart from you, there are a few other accomplices. What are their names? What do they look like? Where are they now? Jiang Pengji asked the last question. It meant that the shifty-eyed man had reached the end of his life. The man answered each question one by one. Jiang Pengji's expression turned cold, as if it could freeze a person's heart. Good answer. I'll give you a quick death this time. Jiang Pengji easily ended the man's life. Out of habit, she cleaned up the evidence of the crime. Then, she stood up and left the alley with her usual expression. A figure in green stood at the entrance of the alley. Her clothes fluttered in the night breeze, and the cold moonlight illuminated her figure. Jiang Pengji was not surprised to see Feng Jin. She walked up to him, and before he could say anything, she had already stabbed him. Don't pretend to be cool when you're thin. Feng Jin was speechless. Be careful. You'll have a headache the next day. Don't blame it on me. Feng Jin took a deep breath to avoid being angered to death. It was easy to get into trouble in deep alleys, not to mention Lang Lang Alley. It was estimated that 10 to 20% of the gangsters and wanderers in Hejin County were gathered there. Those people did not consider the consequences. They did things based on their mood. If Jiang Pengji provoked them, they would not be merciful. However, as soon as he thought of Jiang Pengji's strength, his worries changed. It would be fine if she did not take the initiative to cause trouble. Jiang Pengji looked him up and down. Why did you come out? The warm air in the house is much better than the cold wind outside. I wanted to come out for some fresh air, but I didn't expect to meet the 2 ladies who served you before. I felt something was wrong, so I asked. I didn't expect you to be so daring. How could you run around in such a place? If anything happens to you. Feng Jin paused. His gentle face became solemn and serious. His eyes were full of reproach and worry. The person in front of him was not a man. She was a real woman. When a man was bullied, he would at most say that he was flirtatious to comfort himself. However, if a woman got into trouble in such a place, her reputation would be ruined. Jiang Pengji smiled coldly. Something happens? It's good enough if others don't offend me. Feng Jin frowned and suddenly moved closer. His face suddenly darkened. What did you do just now? If you have the guts, you can go in and take a look. He hesitated for a moment, then lit the fire and stepped into the deep alley. After a while, he walked out with weak footsteps. You did it? He deserves to die. If he doesn't die, I don't know how many people will be hounded to death, Jiang Pengji said indifferently. Huayu, accompany me to a place. When you go there, you will know whether the person inside deserves to die or not. Or, you don't have to come. You can directly go to the magistrate and sue me. Feng Jin pursed his lips. Although the aristocratic families controlled the court and controlled the whole of Dongqing, it did not mean that the children of the aristocratic families were not guilty of killing people. What was the difference between such disregard for the lives of others and the vermin that the people cursed and hated? However, he did not say these words out loud. Because of admiration, Feng Jin's position was still on Jiang Pengji's side. If the other party could produce evidence, he could even let this matter pass. Where are we going? Feng Jin followed and asked, You have to produce evidence that is convincing enough. I won't cover for you. The sound of wooden clogs landing on the ground was particularly clear. It seemed to completely separate the deep alley from the extravagant world outside. Chapter 106. Why are we going to Mr. Wei Yuan's residence? Instead of answering, Jiang Pengji asked, Huayu, do you know Meng County in Sang Prefecture? Compared to Lu Lanting's closed environment, Feng Jin's tutor was more open. Meng County, Sang Prefecture? Of course I have some understanding, but what does this have to do with what happened before? Feng Jin was about to transform into 100,000 wise. Have you heard of some scandals in Meng County, Sang Prefecture? For example, some women from aristocratic families were humiliated, but the culprit was never found. The moment Jiang Pengji opened her mouth, it was big news. Feng Jin's face turned green, red, and black, almost like a palette. Nonsense, how can a gentleman be interested in such news? Moreover, if your words spread out, do you want to be criticized by others? Landowning gentry ladies are noble. Even if it happened, it wouldn't be spread out so easily. He wanted to say that it was impossible, but when he thought of the dangerous experience of the noble woman in Hejin County, he changed his mind. You're right, Jiang Pengji stopped in her tracks and quickly returned to normal. If such a thing really happened, with the current social atmosphere, the possibility of concealing it was far higher than publicizing it. Do you know something? Is it related to that man? Feng Jin hurriedly took 2 steps forward and stood shoulder to shoulder with Jiang Pengji. He then remembered that Jiang Pengji said she wanted to go to Wei Yuan's mansion, and his scalp went numb. You're still keeping me in suspense? Feng Jin was very curious. The audience in the live broadcast room expressed that this young man had a bright future. He had asked all their questions. Some old viewers in the streaming room had been following the stream for a long time. They knew that Jiang Pengji was good at analyzing. They were sure that she had found some clues. Otherwise, it was impossible for her to suddenly attack a stranger. However, she refused to explain. Everyone was dumbfounded. Fatty Big C, the man who was forced to take his lunchbox by the host, the bamboo booklet with unknown content, the scandal of a noble lady from Meng County in Sang Prefecture being humiliated, the host's teacher, Wei Yuan. When all these clues are connected, it feels extremely scary. Paid axing, now that you mention it, I seem to have thought of something. Could it be that the host's teacher is a monster in human form? Now, Ba, what kind of analysis is that? You can't just let your imagination run wild like that, right? The probability of Mr. Wei Yuan being the victim is much higher. Didn't they say that the gentleman had been on sick leave for a long time? Maybe it had something to do with this? For a moment, a game of You Guess was played in the live broadcast room. Based on the clues revealed by the streamer, they began to make wild guesses. As for which speculations were reliable and which were absurd, Jiang Pengji did not give an answer. Wei Yuan was stubborn and strict. He was strict with his students and never lowered his standards because of their age. Lu Lanting did not like going to the family school, but she did not like studying at home either. Wei Yuan was the main reason. According to Lu Lanting's memories, the little girl respected her teacher very much. However, the teacher was strict and unapproachable. He would often call for a teacher's whip and punish people. This made the sensitive Lu Lanting shy and reserved, and she liked to keep her words to herself. Before Lu Lanting's incident, Wei Yuan had applied for 3 days of leave from the Lu Manor. His illness had worsened and he had to postpone it. Under Takshu's reminder, Jiang Pengji had asked the servants to send gifts to Wei Yuan's manor, but she had never shown up in person. It's rare for me to go to the teacher's manor, but I have to go through the side door. Wei Yuan's manor was a long way from Lang Lang Alley. It took Jiang Pengji and Feng Jin a long time to reach it. By then, it was almost midnight. The sky was dark and the surroundings were silent. Occasionally, they could hear the sound of dogs barking. If you want to visit, you can come during the day. Feng Jin saw that Jiang Pengji was about to roll up her wide sleeves and climb over the wall. His face became distorted, but he did not dare to raise his voice. He could only suppress his voice. If you are caught, Wei Yuan was famous for his strictness. If his student climbed over the wall in the middle of the night, it would be fine if it was in the front yard, but if it was in the backyard, it would be like having mud fall into one's pants. Lu Lanting was not afraid of anything, but he still wanted his reputation. A bad friend could ruin his life. Jiang Pengji stood in the corner for a while and smiled at him. What are you afraid of? Come, I'll be your foothold. You can climb over first. Feng Jin was speechless. They looked at each other in silence for a while. Feng Jin took a deep breath. I don't believe you're that kind. Tell me, how are you going to trick me? Feng Jin clenched his teeth. Only now did he look like a teenager instead of an old and steady noble young master of an aristocratic family. Jiang Pengji smiled. Won't you know after you climb over? Feng Jin looked at her suspiciously, and the uneasiness in his heart grew stronger. Why don't you climb over first? There was something fishy going on. Jiang Pengji mocked him. You go first, and I'll follow. What if I climb over first? Will you be able to climb over? Don't pretend to be a hero in front of me. Feng Jin was speechless. It was tiring to have such an unreliable companion. Logically speaking, with Feng Jin's upbringing, he would never mess around with Jiang Pengji. But he was only a teenager. He had to maintain a steady image in front of others, and he needed some breathing space when he was alone. Not to mention that he admired Jiang Pengji and wanted to know what she was up to. He had fallen for her trap. Feng Jin gritted his teeth and nodded in agreement. He had left behind a dark history that could not be erased. Wei Yuan came from an ordinary family. His mansion was simple, and the walls were not high. Jiang Pengji lowered her body and crossed her arms, indicating for Feng Jin to step on her. Compared to her decisiveness and straightforwardness, Feng Jin was a bit hesitant. Even though his companion was bold and unrestrained, he always forgot her gender. But no matter how forgetful he was, he could not forget the difference in their genders. How can you be so impatient? Feng Jin muttered. He carefully held on to the uneven part of the wall. He had taken off his wooden clogs and was only wearing socks. He stepped on Jiang Pengji's crossed arms with his bare feet. He thought they would fall miserably, but he did not expect his feet to be so steady. He swore that he had never been so rude in his life. He used all his strength to crawl on the wall. Okay, I'm up. It's your turn now, right? Feng Jin looked down from the wall. It was a bit high, and he felt dizzy. Pfft, under the wall, Jiang Pengji burst into laughter. It was especially obvious in the silent night. Feng Jin's heart skipped a beat. Huayu, why don't you take a look at the other side of the wall? Isn't there a bunch of people guarding there? Feng Jin was speechless. He had a bad feeling. He turned his head shakily and stretched his neck to the other side of the wall. Within the walls, they looked at each other. Lu Shi. He was furious. It's better for you to die than for me. If it doesn't work, then let's die together. Chapter 107. I heard you calling me. You don't have to be so loud. Everyone in the neighborhood knows. Without waiting for Feng Jin to really get angry, Jiang Pengji leaped up and stepped on the wall. Using the momentum, she climbed steadily to the top of the wall. Feng Jin hugged the wall with both of his hands, looking extremely flustered. He looked up at Jiang Pengji with trembling eyes, as if he was looking at his enemy. If he had known that Jiang Pengji was very naive, unreliable, he would have foolishly jumped into her trap. It was a great humiliation. Feng Jin was in a dilemma. He wished he could strangle his previous self to death. Sir, please don't blame me. Huayu and I came here today for a reason. We had no choice but to climb over the wall. Jiang Pengji said with a smile. When she jumped into the wall, she conveniently brought Feng Jin, who was clinging to the wall, down. Inside the walls, there were indeed a few servants guarding. Other than that, a middle-aged man dressed in plain clothes stood in front of them like a pine tree. He had a neatly trimmed beard and a pair of dark and gloomy eyes. He stared at Jiang Pengji with some suspicion and scrutiny. That was to be expected. For a student to climb over his teacher's wall in the middle of the night, and at such a sensitive time, anyone would be suspicious. However, Wei Yuan didn't pin the crime on her because her age didn't meet the criteria. In any case, Wei Yuan was still a student that he had personally taught. His student would not be a despicable person. Lanting, you've really harmed me this time. He had made a bad friend by mistake, and his 10 years of good reputation would be ruined in a day. Be good, don't throw a tantrum. Jiang Pengji dismissed him like she was coaxing a child. Feng Jin widened his eyes in astonishment, as if it was his first day meeting Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji bowed to Wei Yuan and greeted him respectfully, Sir. Wei Yuan didn't appreciate it. Instead, he coldly flicked his sleeves and dodged her bow, giving her a cold snort. He did believe that Lu Shi was not a despicable person, but that did not explain why the kid climbed over his wall in the middle of the night. Climbing over the wall was one thing, but observing the conversation between him and the strange young man, Lanting clearly knew that there was someone on the other side of the wall, yet he deliberately climbed over. Knowing one's mistake and making a mistake was even worse. Feng Jin straightened his wide sleeves and did not bother to tidy up his slightly disheveled appearance. He bowed deeply to Wei Yuan. Feng Jin greets Mr. Wei. There is a reason for what happened today. Mr. Wei, please calm down and wait for Lanting's explanation. Although Feng Jin could not wait to have a showdown with Jiang Pengji, the two of them were on the same boat. Before Wei Yuan's anger was extinguished, they had to work together and not drag each other down. Feng Jin. Your surname is Feng? But the Feng family of Shanyang? What does Minister Feng Xianda have to do with you? Feng was a rare surname. In Dongqing, when the Feng family was mentioned, most people would subconsciously think of the Feng family in Shanyang. Wei Yuan looked at Feng Jin's clothes and accessories. They were all expensive and hard to find treasures. It was obvious that his family was not poor. Feng Jin blushed and felt extremely embarrassed. He couldn't answer, but he also couldn't not answer. In the end, he blushed and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, "I am from the Feng family of Shangyang. The minister is my father." Wei Yuan was speechless. Faced with Wei Yuan's almost indifferent expression, some of the quick-witted spectators quickly moved their fingers, drowning his face in the barrage of insults. "Now, oh my God, the son of the minister came to my house. Fatty big C, blue skinny, Xianggu, this guy's background is too big. How should we deal with him? Urgent, waiting online. Hongjun Laozu's Juhua, don't be fooled by my nonchalance. I'm actually burning with anxiety. How can I maintain my cold and aloof image? This guy in front of me doesn't play by the rules. I can't beat his father. Urgent, waiting online." Of course, there were also some insults in a more bizarre style. "Sorcerer's girl Afeng, that guy is the son of the minister of Shangyang. Despicable, truly despicable." Jiang Pengji thought that Wei Yuan's expression and the barrage of comments made it even more delicious. She was secretly delighted, but her expression did not change. Instead, a chuckle beside her attracted everyone's attention. At that moment, she noticed that there was not only a fully armed servant beside Wei Yuan, but also a young man in his 20s. The man's eyebrows were slightly sharp, and his eyes were dark and lifeless. Being stared at by him made one feel an inexplicable chill in one's heart. His complexion and skin were a bit rough and dark yellow, but his appearance was extremely heroic. Even the gloomy coldness in his eyes couldn't make people ignore the advantage of his facial features. His face was deep, and his lips were slightly dry, with some white skin curling up. It was like a cracked riverbed that had been dry for a long time. The material of his clothes was not very good, and it was a little old. Not only did it not fit him well, but it had also been washed to the point of discoloration. His collar and cuffs were badly worn, but his hair was combed neatly, and he stood tall and straight, so one could not tell that he was in dire straits. He was in his 20s, and his wife and widower had died. He had come from the north, and it seemed that he was from a border city near the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. His father was of a different race, and his mother was a gentle and loving Chinese woman. The two of them were not happy, and his father had a bad habit of abusing his wife and children. He was cold and ruthless, and he had killed more than one person. His father was already dead, and he was probably the one who killed him. His palms were thick, and his knuckles were slightly deformed from years of martial arts practice. He was much stronger than Feng Jin. His socks were bleeding, and the wound was on his feet, but he could still maintain his upright posture without a change in expression. She liked his ruthlessness and forbearance. While Jiang Pengji was analyzing him, the young man was also sizing her up. After a long time, the young man shook his feather fan and faced Wei Yuan with regret. "Master Gong Chao, it's not him." Wei Yuan's face darkened. A few servants still surrounded Jiang Pengji and Feng Jin, not daring to let their guard down. He trusted his student, so he did not doubt the young man's judgment. But he could not think of a reason why his student would climb over the wall in the middle of the night. "Master, I came here today because of an urgent matter. If not, I would not have to resort to such a method." Jiang Pengji didn't mind, but Wei Yuan couldn't bear to see such a shocking act. If this matter were to spread out, who knew what kind of people would talk about it? He would not be able to face anyone, and Lu Lanting would be ruined. No matter what the student wanted to talk to him about, he had chosen to climb over the wall instead of using the main door. It would be strange if someone like him could stand it. Feng Jin treated himself as the background and kept his head down. He was implicated by Lu Shi, the scammer, in this matter. "Oh, I want to hear what reason you have." Chapter 108. If the student could give in and apologize, Wei Yuan would tolerate it for Lu Shi's sake, no matter how unhappy he was. But now, he was so angry that he laughed. He had to hear what the stubborn student had to say. What was so important that she had to climb over the wall in the middle of the night? Jiang Pengji was not afraid at all. Instead, she looked confident. The The young man with the feather fan raised his hand. His eyes flashed with interest as he said to Wei Yuan, Master Gongqiao, why don't you go to the main hall and listen to what this young man has to say? It would be best if you could dismiss your attendants. I'm sure this young man will not disappoint you. Wei Yuan was shocked to hear this. However, he was also a wise old man. He quickly composed himself and put on a stern face. Come here. Jiang Pengji stopped him. There is no need to rush. Before I explain, I have a presumptuous request. I hope you will agree to it. Speak. This student would like to take the liberty to meet the womenfolk in Sir's backyard, including a group of female servants. Wei Yuan was angered by her insatiable behavior. If it were not for the young man's words, he would have started scolding her. A 12-year-old was considered half an adult in this era. Many of them had their own families. Naturally, Wei Yuan did not see Jiang Pengji as a child. He saw her as an adult man. An adult male had climbed over his wall in the middle of the night and even said that he wanted to see the women in his house. Faced with such straightforward humiliation, it was already a sign of his self-restraint that he didn't lash out at him, kick him out, or send him to the magistrate's office. Love go little Shuanet, Chu. The young man narrowed his eyes and looked at Jiang Pengji. He had an intuition. Master Gongqiao, you'd better agree. This young man did not come with evil intentions. I'm afraid it is for your own good. Wei Yuan, who had been furious, calmed down by the young man's words. This change made Jiang Pengji and Feng Jin look at him carefully. Jiang Pengji had exposed the young man's past. The young man felt a chill in his heart, but he could not tell why. Wei Yuan's face darkened. He gritted his teeth and agreed. Just listen to Wenjing once. Jiang Pengji laughed to herself. It seemed that the teacher's sick leave was fake, and the haunting in the backyard was real. According to this person's temperament, if he found out that there were strange men's clothes or traces of activity in his concubine's room, he would be so angry that his blood pressure would soar. The reason why he had taken leave until now was probably because he had not finished with this mess. He wanted to catch the adulterer, but he ran into her. Wei Yuan walked in front with big strides. Jiang Pengji followed behind him at a steady pace. She was right next to the young man. She smiled and asked tentatively, How should I address you, Lang Jun? Feng Jin's expression seemed normal, but there was a hint of displeasure in it. His bad friend had tricked him, and before he could even give him an explanation, he had already hooked up with a weird-looking outsider. How unfair. I am Qiguan Rang. Jiang Pengji frowned. Although she hated the messy names in this era, she still asked out of habit. What's your courtesy name? The young man's eyes were still gloomy, and he said mercilessly, My young friend, our relationship is shallow. We don't even have a courtesy name. In other words, he said, I don't know you that well. Don't try to get close to me. Jiang Pengji's heart skipped a beat. She lowered her voice and asked at a volume that only she, the young man, and Feng Jin could hear. Don't say that. Strictly speaking, you are my future brother-in-law. Why do you have to treat me like an outsider? Feng Jin listened attentively, and then he looked confused. Lanting has a sister? After asking, he came back to his senses. She did have a mistress's daughter, but she seemed to be less than 9 years old. Feng Jin was dumbfounded. However, when her words fell into the young man's ears, it was no different from a sudden clap of thunder. His mind went blank for a moment. She interrupted him and repeated her question. What's your courtesy name? If she wanted to know, she had to know. Even if he did not want to answer, she would find a way to make him answer. The young man was speechless. After a while, the young man calmed himself down and said calmly, Didn't you hear him? Jiang Pengji raised her eyelids and rolled her eyes. It's different when you introduce yourself and when others mention it in passing. The young man took a deep breath and faintly sympathized with Feng Jin. That must be how he felt when he was tricked. My name is Qiguan Rang. My courtesy name is Wenjing. How should I address you? Lu Shi. That's it? The young man waited for a while, but he did not hear anything else. His expression became slightly twisted as he suddenly remembered Feng Jin mentioning Lanting. That must be Lu Shi's courtesy name. Although they had only met for a short while, the young man had the urge to raise his fan and slap her. She was asking for a beating. Jiang Pengji looked at Wei Yuan's silhouette in front of her with a complicated expression. Wenjing, are you curious about how I know that you are looking for a son-in-law? Qiguan Rang nodded. He was indeed curious. Wei Yuan had only mentioned it to him vaguely, and no one else knew about it. Jiang Pengji revealed it as soon as she arrived, so it was impossible for Qiguan Rang not to be curious. Could she be eavesdropping? That was impossible. Jiang Pengji was about to speak, but she suddenly turned to Feng Jin and said, "Don't listen to indecent things. Cover your ears." Feng Jin was speechless. He was innocent. Although he was also curious, since Jiang Pengji had said so, the inside story was probably not suitable for people other than Qiguan Rang to listen. He obediently raised his hands to cover his ears and purposely took a few steps back to prevent himself from accidentally hearing something. His pitiful appearance instantly aroused the sympathy of a group of otakus overflowing with motherly love in the live broadcast room. Gifts flooded the screen like a stream of water. Seeing that, Jiang Pengji wanted to bully Feng Jin even more. What should she do? Wenjing's arrival at the Wei residence was not at the right time. It coincidentally happened to be a scandal that outsiders should not listen to. Jiang Pengji whispered the contents that shocked Qiguan Rang. This content is not only related to Master Wei's concubines in his harem. More seriously, it may even implicate his daughters, who are my 2 junior sisters. Thinking about it, even if the 2 ladies are fine, their reputations will be ruined in a day. Following that, Jiang Pengji calmly revealed a series of high-powered information. Wenjing, you lost your wife at a young age, and you were born in the border of the northern borderline. The people there are tough, and they don't care much about a woman's reputation. At least, they don't care about it as much as the noble sons of Dongqing's aristocratic families. With such a thing happening, no matter if it's the eldest or the second lady, I'm afraid it will be difficult for them to get married in the future. If such a thing happened to the daughters of the aristocratic families, it would not be too difficult for them to get married. Of course, they could not be picky about the conditions of their husbands. They could either marry a son of the first wife with a slightly higher status, or a son of a concubine who was hardworking and talented but had a lower status. Chapter 109. Mr. Wei understands this. He doesn't want to ruin the rest of his daughter's life, but he also doesn't want them to live the rest of their lives in solitary confinement, so he has to find another way out. He thinks highly of your talent and admires you. He might even want to betroth his daughter to you. Now that this has happened, there's no way he'll let you go. I said you're his future brother-in-law. What's wrong with that? Qiguan Rang was silent for a while. Or rather, he was speechless. The young man named Lu Shi's analysis was correct, but he still had a few doubts. Jiang Pengji moved closer and said mysteriously, "It's the first lady, right?" Qiguan Rang glanced at her. He had one more doubt. He walked away quickly, not wanting to see the gossipy expression on Jiang Pengji's face. He wanted some peace and quiet. Lovelorn Front Lianmeng, why does he feel sorry for Qiguan Rang? The streamer exposed his secrets the moment they met. I guess he's feeling a little uneasy. I don't care if Dali doesn't stop or if he's glad. I'm glad I don't live in an environment where there's no streamer. Even though it was fun to watch the live stream and they could even complain about it on the bullet screen, watching the streamer bully others or tear apart her own viewers, it was all from the perspective of a bystander. It was just a show to kill time. If there was such a person in real life, it would be horrifying to see through one's secrets the moment they met. A secret is a secret because only a few people know about it. However, Jiang Pengji's actions broke this rule. Naturally, it would cause others to be afraid and ostracize her. She doesn't play by the rules. Secrets have nowhere to hide from her. She's a monster. Love 100%. I checked the surnames on Baidu. If it's a surname, it should be Qiguan, right? Tong, Qi, 2 times. 100 Ghosts Night Walk, _ smiley face 3 angle, _ I'm just an ordinary person. I'm happy watching, so I don't think too much. Tudu Feitio, same. As long as you're happy. We're just watching the live stream. Why think so much? Streamer Jing Shanghua, we're watching the live stream from the streamer's perspective. The viewing experience should be from the streamer's perspective and role. If it was a stupid host who got bullied and stepped on everywhere, who would be able to watch it? Anyway, I'm feeling all sorts of good now. Streamer's side of me, 23333. After watching the live broadcast, I feel like my IQ has increased by several %. Streamer's back on me, who's better at topping up IQ? Palace Intrigue live stream helps you. Jiang Pengji was speechless. No matter what, she couldn't face these demonic audiences and their IDs. Although Feng Jin did not hear what the two of them said, he could not help but remember how Jiang Pengji had threatened him when he saw Qiguan Rang's reaction. Suddenly, he felt sympathy for her and complained to her, "You scared him. You're scared just like that? What shall we do then?" She said significantly. "Shall we have to be alarmed every day?" Lo Siji Lianmeng, who's so surprised? Jiang Pengji was speechless. He had a bad premonition. Even though Wei Yuan was extremely unhappy, he still followed Jiang Pengji's instructions and asked the womenfolk to come out and look at them through the thin screen. She frowned and shook her head. Wei Yuan's face darkened and he ordered the maidservants to bring them back. Next were the female servants. The female servants were not as refined as the female servants, and it was fine for them to be stared at by an outsider once or twice. Therefore, they were simply allowed to gather in a relatively wide corridor. The surrounding servants each held a torch, brightly illuminating the courtyard. Feng Jin saw that she was serious and did not dare to interrupt her thoughts. Qiguan Rang looked at Jiang Pengji seriously, as if he was trying to read some useful information from her face. However, the result surprised him. He was a 12-year-old boy, the age when his emotions should be the most exposed. Even if he had been educated by an aristocratic family, his age and experience made it impossible for him to be as impenetrable as an old fox. People would always be able to find a loophole. But the boy's situation made him tremble with fear, and he was secretly very excited. The more he could not find out, the more it meant that the boy was full of secrets. In Qiguan Rang's opinion, there were 2 extraordinary people in Dongqing in recent years. One was Master Yuanjing of Langia, who single-handedly took back the 3 cities by the border. The other was Lu Shi of Hejian, who had worked hard for many years to bring Hu County back to life. He had achieved a feat that many capable officials of the previous Xia dynasty could not achieve. Lu Shi was Lu Shi's son. He had the demeanor of his father, but he was also a hidden person. Lanting, what did you find out? It was rare for Qiguan Rang to put on a stiff smile. The corners of his lips were raised unnaturally. Perhaps he was used to wearing a cold expression all year round. The emotion of smiling was too foreign to him. Therefore, when he smiled, it was more of a fake smile. It was strange and treacherous. Of course I found out. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to answer to the master today, would I? After she finished speaking, Jiang Pengji got up and walked to the corridor. She walked straight into the crowd of servants, her eyes fixed on one target. It was a woman who looked to be in her early 30s. Her skin was brown, and there were 3 wrinkles between her eyebrows. There were obvious wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. She looked a few years older than her actual age. Her shoulders were slightly bowed, and she looked extremely honest. Her fingertips that were exposed outside her sleeves were red and purple. Before she was called there, she was diligently washing clothes with well water. At first glance, she was just an ordinary servant. She had the dullness and diligence of an honest person. There was nothing special about her. If there was anything wrong with her, it would be that her appearance was average, but her facial features were kind. She gave people a feeling that she was easy to get along with. However, some people were born with a strong affinity. That could not be used as evidence that there was something wrong with her. Qiguan Rang quickly glanced at the target Jiang Pengji was staring at. He was slightly suspicious. Why did she look for a servant? Could it be? Qiguan Rang's eyes turned quickly. His eyes were wide open because of the answer that flashed in his mind. So that was the truth. Qiguan Rang's eyes flashed. He opened his mouth and said, "Catch that woman." Jiang Pengji walked toward her. The servant kept her head down, as if she was the most ordinary servant. There was no flaw in her expression. However, her nerves were secretly on edge. Until Jiang Pengji was in front of her, her nerves were already at their most sensitive. At that moment, Qiguan Rang's voice exploded in her ears. Or rather, he was completely flustered. He knew that his identity was exposed, and he did not mean to trick him. "You still want to escape?" The person panicked. He quickly grabbed a servant beside him and pushed him toward Jiang Pengji. The crowd was in an uproar. The order was instantly chaotic. Chapter 110. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Before the crowd could recover from the shock, they were plunged into another wave of fear. Someone's dead. No one knew who shouted, but the crowd was as quiet as chickens. They silently retreated, forming a large circle. "What are you shouting for?" "She's not dead yet," Jiang Pengji scolded. The crowd could not help but move to the sides to make a path for her. The maid who was pushed had just woken up from the scare. She was distracted just now and suddenly felt a huge force pushing her in another direction. For a moment, she was so scared that her heart almost jumped out of her throat. Then, she fell steadily into a thin but strong embrace. She raised her head shyly and stole a glance at Jiang Pengji's appearance. From this angle, she looked as delicate and pretty as a lady. She thought blankly. Then, as if she had touched a fire, she quickly left Jiang Pengji. "Thank you for saving me, Lang Jun." Her voice was as soft as a mosquito's. She did not dare to raise her voice. "It's good that you're fine. You and the rest of the servants should go and rest. It's best if you forget what happened tonight." Jiang Pengji stared coldly at the servant, who was lying on the ground, her hands covering her bleeding neck. Her voice was cold as ice. The maid did not care. She timidly glanced at Mr. Wei Yuan. After getting his approval, she followed Jiang Pengji's orders. After all, they were not servants of the Lus. If they listened to Jiang Pengji's orders without hesitation, Wei Yuan would probably feel uncomfortable. "This is clearly a woman." Wei Yuan only left his trusted butler behind. The rest of the servants were dismissed. Jiang Pengji saw the sandalwood fan that she had thrown and cut the servant's neck. She bent down to pick it up and wiped the blood off with a handkerchief. How could it be a woman? "If you don't believe me, why don't you take off all your clothes and check?" Wei Yuan nodded and signaled for the butler to help. Jiang Pengji looked down and stood aside. She was like a spectator in the live stream room. However, the viewers in the live stream room were not calm. They saw the butler roll up his sleeves and touch the servant's crotch. He seemed to pinch it. His face scrunched up like a chrysanthemum flower, and then a look of horror appeared on his face. The scene was too intense. Everything happened too suddenly. They were so shocked that they forgot to comment. Hongjun Laozu's chrysanthemum, */w***. Oh, my eyes are going blind. First, the host had stepped on the other party's balls and **ck. Then, an elderly man had touched a woman, who looked like a middle-aged woman. Today's live broadcast was too dirty. Streamer Zhengqiao Shangguo, I don't care about anything else. I just want to know how it feels. Although the live stream was very dirty, the old driver in the live stream room seemed to be even dirtier. Things like moral integrity were lost after a while. The system, which had not said anything for a while, was bad. The system translator, Lu editor, asterisk asterisk. The viewers in the live stream room are so dirty. Can I control their mouths and their hands? As a system, it's your dereliction of duty if you don't censor certain words. What does that have to do with me? Jiang Pengji pushed the blame away. The system, she sounded reasonable. It could not think of a reason to refute her. While they were bickering, the old butler stood up and walked to Wei Yuan's side. He nodded solemnly. It's really a man. Wei Yuan almost fainted from anger when he heard the answer. He did not have any impression of the servants in the backyard, but he knew that those who did laundry had the right to enter the inner and outer courtyards. In other words, the culprit who bullied his concubine, made him a cuckold, and ruined his daughter's reputation was the wailing bastard in front of him. He was still angry when he remembered that he had accidentally found a male object when he was resting in his concubine's room. What made him feel even more humiliated was that the scandal had already reached the ears of someone who should not have known. Qiguan Rang was the son-in-law that he had his eyes on. He came from a poor family and had a rough life. He was also a widower who had lost his wife. Although his eldest daughter was a bit of a loss, it was not shameful for her to be with him. He had observed Qiguan Rang for a long time and felt that he could be trusted. Since Qiguan Rang was his future son-in-law, even if it was shameful, it was still his family. For the sake of his poor daughter, he was willing to let go of his pride. What harm was there in enduring it? His student, Lu Shi, was also involved. He seemed to be in the know. Otherwise, how could he explain the kid's actions that night? Was he going to make Lu Shi his son-in-law as well? What was more depressing was that if the kid had not climbed over the wall in the middle of the night, the fake woman in front of them would have escaped and they would not have been able to find the culprit. Therefore, he couldn't blame himself, but if he didn't blame himself, he would be holding back his anger, and he would always feel embarrassed. His illustrious reputation had been completely thrown away tonight. As he thought about it, Wei Yuan's usually straight back could not help but slump a little. It was as if he was in his twilight years. Even though Feng Jin did not know what had happened, based on the information that Jiang Pengji had revealed and her reaction, he could roughly guess the truth. When the housekeeper confirmed that the servant was a man, he wished he had been blind. Lu Shi, this naive and sweet, unreliable friend of his, had actually dragged him into this kind of scandal. Even though he was able to keep his mouth shut, Wei Yuan was probably already holding a grudge against him. It would have been fine if Feng Jin didn't move, but once he did, Wei Yuan noticed him. Wei Yuan was speechless. Oh, I forgot there's another one. Streamer sighed Shanghua, even though I know I shouldn't laugh at a time like this, I can't help but want to laugh. This Master Wei Yuan is so unlucky. His wives and concubines are being bullied and he's being cuckolded. Streamer's back Shanghua, even though I want to laugh too, I'm more concerned about my wives and concubines. Yes, they were watching the live stream for fun. To put it simply, they were watching the gossip of others for entertainment. But the person at the center of the incident might not be so happy. Needless to say, Wei Yuan seemed to be an old-fashioned ancient Confucian. His wives and concubines were touched by a man outside. Even if he was still innocent, as an ancient man, he would definitely have a knot in his heart. So, what about the unlucky women in the backyard? Based on the streamer's conversation with Qiguan Rang, Wei Yuan treated his daughters well. He was willing to plan for the rest of their lives for them. But wives and concubines were not daughters. It was a matter of a man's dignity and the color of his hat. How could he be so kind? It was one thing to watch the spectacle, but it was another thing to feel sympathy or not. Chapter 111. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Jiang Pengji looked coldly at the series of comments and countless large donations on the live streaming screen. Most of them hoped that she could help the innocent women who were implicated. She laughed in her heart, but at the same time, she was somewhat silent. It was fun to watch the drama and treat the pain of others as entertainment. But the sympathy and actions they showed after the incident were not completely fake. More than half of them were sincere. What a contradictory group of people. Jiang Pengji did not respond to the audience. Instead, she looked at Wei Yuan with interest. She guessed that the teacher had started to think that she knew about his scandal. Even though she did know about it, according to her previous actions, the situation could still be turned around. She took a step forward and kicked the artificial dumpling away with her wooden clogs, forcing it to turn over. She asked softly, "How do you plan to deal with this criminal?" Wei Yuan's face had turned black. It was as if he was on the verge of exploding. "Kill him and feed him to the dogs." "Do you want to keep him alive to harm others?" Wei Yuan answered subconsciously. When he regained his composure, he realized that his tone was filled with violence. It was a far cry from his usual demeanor. As for reporting it to the authorities? If he reported it to the authorities, it would be the same as announcing his family's scandal to the world. He would be too ashamed to live. The servant, who was tied up like a dumpling and gagged, curled up on the ground and whimpered as if she was begging for mercy. "Kill him and feed him to the dogs. That's a good idea." Jiang Pengji smiled faintly. Feng Jin and Qiguan Rang, who were beside her, gave her a scrutinizing look. Feng Jin reacted quickly. After witnessing Jiang Pengji's ruthless methods, he did not expect her to be kind. Qiguan Rang, on the other hand, was shocked and curious. Shouldn't a pampered noble's son be so indecisive? Shouldn't he be soft-hearted all the time? But this person was different. Not only was he not kind, but he carried a shocking coldness and hostility. "However, I came here tonight for this person. Please forgive me, teacher, and let him live for the time being." Jiang Pengji bowed and apologized. Under Wei Yuan's suspicious gaze, she explained, "Tonight, I was having a drink with my father at the Yingchun brothel. I happened to see an old maid bullying a lady in the brothel. I didn't think much of it at first, but the more I looked at her, the more I felt there was something strange about her." Wei Yuan was speechless. Wait a minute, I seem to have heard something very powerful. If he hadn't heard wrongly, the kid had said that he and his father, Lu Shi, the father and son, were drinking in a brothel. Qiguan Rang also felt that his worldview had been refreshed. A father and son going to that kind of place? Father and son going to that kind of place? Jiang Pengji didn't care about their strange gazes. Anyway, Lu Shi would take all the blame. Out of curiosity, I followed them, but I saw a great show of people turning into living beings. After the other party took off his clothes one by one, a gray-haired old woman who was sweeping the floor turned into a man of about 30 years of age with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks. She had wanted to leave, but she had disturbed them and captured them. After inquiring, I found out the truth. Because of this, I had to climb over the wall in the middle of the night. If I had waited until tomorrow, I'm afraid. Jiang Pengji simplified the process. She also beautified the interrogation as questioning. There was nothing bloody about it. Then, she took out a small roll of bamboo slips and presented it to Wei Yuan. "Based on what I know, there are more than just these two men who know of this disguise method and blend into the backyard of others. Why do they do it? Maybe they are trying to escape from the authorities. They are probably from Tsang Prefecture's Meng County. They sneaked to Hejian recently." Jiang Pengji said it in a businesslike manner. She was just short of telling Wei Yuan that she had no idea what was going on in his backyard. Of course, this was just an obvious cover. Although it was useless, covering it was better than not covering it. Wei Yuan took the bamboo scroll and looked through it. His face changed from anger to ashen, and then to silence. Although he was silent, the anger in his heart was stronger than before. These vermin. After a long time, Wei Yuan's face turned ashen as he smashed the bamboo scroll in his hand. Jiang Pengji looked down and did not have the slightest intention of picking up the booklet. How is this a proper scroll? It's the great achievements of those guys. On a certain day, they would target a woman or a girl, disguise themselves as a woman, and try to sneak into the family. They would patiently achieve their goal. Not only would they describe the woman's appearance, age, figure, and skin feel, but they would also proudly write down their thoughts after the deed was done. They would also summarize the pros and cons of the operation. Of course, they would also summarize their personal experiences, such as how to silence the victim or how to coax them to have sex with them multiple times. Occasionally, they would mock the man of the house for not being able to satisfy the woman and praise themselves. But that was not the point. The point was the origin of the women. 30% of them were ordinary women from Meng County, Tsang Prefecture, or women who had been widowed for a long time. The other 70% were the concubines of rich merchants and poor families. There were even some unmarried girls who could not escape the clutches of those people. What's more, Wei Yuan even saw some of his acquaintances in the scroll. When he thought of his acquaintances in Meng County, Tsang Prefecture, doing the same thing, he felt anger and sympathy. Fortunately, he did not see the contents of his own backyard. Otherwise, he would not be able to face his students. These people were originally from Meng County, Tsang Prefecture. They are arrogant and familiar with their methods. It's not the first time they've done this. What a joke. If they were not familiar with it, they would not have been able to write such a concise and comprehensive afterthought. In the other room, Qiguan Rang had already picked up the scroll and skimmed through it. After Wei Yuan calmed down, he frowned. If the contents are true, then the truth must be shocking. Jiang Pengji snorted. It's not just shocking. Look at this scroll. What did you discover about the materials used to make the bamboo slips? Look at the handwriting. Although it is not the work of a master, you can see that it is a solid foundation. If it was not for hard work, how could one have such skills? Besides, these families are all famous people in Meng County, Tsang Prefecture. Their backyards may not be as thick as an iron bucket, but it is not a place that ordinary servants can enter. How can a lowly servant easily come into contact with an unmarried wife or a married woman? Wei Yuan did not say anything. Qiguan Rang sat up straight and waved the feather fan in his hand. His cold eyes shone brightly. Everyone knew that these vermin who had been harassing women in other people's backyards for fun had a powerful background. Chapter 112. I have a guess, but I haven't verified it yet, so I can't say it out loud. Qiguan Rang looked down and turned to Jiang Pengji. Lanting came to visit late at night because she got the information from that person. If that's the case, do you have any clues about the others? Jiang Pengji shook her head. No. If she didn't know the exact number of people, she wouldn't have needed to go to Wei Yuan's place to catch the person. Those people were very cautious and had almost no contact with each other. If you trust me, you can hand the person over to me. I guarantee that he will tell you everything about his ancestors. As Jiang Pengji spoke, a faint smile hung on the corner of her lips. It made one shudder with fear, and Qiguan Rang secretly glanced at her. No matter how angry Wei Yuan was, the matter had already been settled, and it seemed that there were some unspeakable scandals involved. Wei Yuan's surname was Wei and he was related to Wei Jingxian's family, but he wasn't as prominent as Wei Jingxian. If it was just a normal rapist, he could just kill him in secret. But if it was serious, he couldn't do anything about it. Up to you. She was very familiar with interrogations, but other than the viewers in the streaming room who were lucky enough to witness it once, no one else had seen it. Jiang Pengji didn't plan to let others see it to avoid ruining Lu Shi's reputation. Then I'll leave first. I'll come back to you after I get some information. Then she led the others away. Feng Jin stayed with Wei Yuan and Jiang Pengji. Qiguan Rang watched her leave. Suspicion flashed in his eyes, and he kept hitting his knees with his feather fan. Second, Lang Junlu's way of doing things is a bit strange. He's completely different from what Mr. Wei said. Feng Jin was lost in thought when he heard Qiguan Rang's words. He snapped back to reality and looked at Qiguan Rang. Lanting is a bit out of line, but it's not strange. She's still a child, and she's at an age where her temperament isn't stable. If she's not restrained, she'll go astray. If there's a big change, it's normal for her to change. Feng Jin defended Jiang Pengji gently, which made Qiguan Rang look at him. Accident? Wei Yuan suddenly remembered that due to family matters, it had been a long time since he had gone to the Lu residence to teach a student. He didn't know much about this obedient and sensible student, who he rarely worried about. He didn't even know what had happened to make this student seem like a stranger. In the past, Lu Shi had always treated him with respect and even fear. Now, he was still respectful, but it was more on the surface. "Mister, you don't know? A few days ago, the bandits in the mountains ran into Lanting and a group of noble ladies in Hejin County and took them away. If not for Lanting's quick wit, they might not have been able to escape unscathed. It must have been that incident that caused Lanting's temperament to change." Feng Jin didn't know what kind of person Lu Shi was in the past, and he didn't deliberately dig into it. What he saw was the willful and cunning Jiang Pengji. "I've never heard of such a thing." Wei Yuan's expression softened, and there was even a hint of guilt on his face. A teacher for a day, a father for life. This saying was not only useful for students, it was also useful for teachers. Even though he always felt that his students' comprehension was too low, his reaction was too slow, and his spirituality was insufficient, he was still a student that he had taught for many years. He had feelings for his student. Something so big had happened to him, but as a teacher, he had neglected it. On the other side, Jiang Pengji had neatly forced the man into a state of confusion. This time, the audience in the streaming room was much calmer than the previous time. Or perhaps they were mentally prepared. Another important reason was that Jiang Pengji's behavior was in line with their subconscious idea of using violence to curb violence. If they sympathized with the beast that had harmed so many innocent women, who would sympathize with the poor women that had been abused? The ancient times were not their era. If a woman were to experience such a thing, it would be equivalent to ruining the rest of her peaceful life. Therefore, there was no need to sympathize with the beast. However, even though they didn't want to punish Jiang Pengji, they couldn't stand the way she did things while commenting on the bullet screen. It was as scary as the ring of death. They were scared, but they couldn't bear to leave the streaming room. They could only use the bullet screen to protect themselves from the horrible images. Wuliang Tianzuan, high energy ahead, bullet screen protection. All the mighty ones will defend with me. Now, prosperity, democracy, civility, harmony, freedom, equality, justice, rule of law, patriotism, professionalism, integrity, friendliness. Similar duplicated bullet screens filled the entire live streaming screen, forcing Jiang Pengji to temporarily turn them off. "What's your name?" Jiang Pengji asked the most basic question. "Lin Zhouzi." Her mouth twitched. The previous one was Lin Gosheng, and this one was Lin Zhouzi. Honestly, were they really not picked up by their parents from the garbage dump or given to them as a gift? It was such a name. Because of this new idea, Jiang Pengji did not follow the previous direction. Instead, she chose a different path. "Do you know where the other accomplices are?" As she spoke, she took out a roll of cloth from the man's clothes. There was also a small bamboo scroll inside. The contents of the scroll were similar to the previous one. They were all women from Meng County. The only difference was that the names of these women were different. At the end of the scroll, she saw some information about Wei Yuan's residence. Not only did the man in front of him have his eyes on Wei Yuan's concubine, but he was also drooling over her two beautiful daughters. She flipped through Lu Shi's memories related to Wei Yuan's daughters, and her face darkened. Her eyes were so cold that it was as if she was looking at a dead man. She lifted her hand and removed the bamboo scroll. Then, she crushed it with her bare hands. After a while, she threw the crushed bamboo scroll on the ground and used her wooden clogs to cover it up. Following Jiang Pengji's questions, the man told her everything he knew. His expression was muddled, and white foam kept coming out of the corner of his mouth. His face turned from red to pale, and then from pale to green. His breathing was sometimes rapid and sometimes slow. Jiang Pengji knew very well that it was impossible for a normal person to survive torture in ancient times. Not only would torture bring great harm to the body, but it would also cause a devastating blow to the fragile spiritual realm. Moreover, this kind of collapse was irreversible. Even in her era, when the medical development of the spiritual realm was so advanced, there were not many lucky people who could recover. There was not much time left for her to ask questions. Jiang Pengji picked out a few important ones. Chapter 113. Qiguan Rang was born poor, but he had a lot of experience in the borderlands. At a young age, he already knew how to protect himself. He wandered between the various forces in the borderlands with ease. His knowledge and experience were abnormally rich. It was not something that a young man like Feng Jin, who only had theories, could compare to. At first, Feng Jin felt that this person was difficult to get along with. However, after exchanging a few words, he suddenly became interested. After a few rounds of probing, Zhang Xian felt as if he had met his match. During the conversation, the way he addressed him also changed from the distant Lang Jun to Wenzheng. In ancient times, the friendship between men, especially scholars, often developed from that instant of palpitation. When I heard what Wenjing said earlier, I had a guess in my heart, but I haven't been able to verify it. What is it? Qiguan Rang tapped the feather fan in his hand on his knee and said in a serious tone, Huayu, do you know the Meng family from Meng County in Sang Prefecture? Feng Jin didn't understand why their conversation had anything to do with the Meng family from Meng County in Sangzhou. Before he could reveal a puzzled expression, an extremely bold guess suddenly flashed in his mind, and he was so shocked that he almost lost his composure. Wenzheng, how could you? Qiguan Rang smiled coldly. His eyes became even colder and gloomier. Feng Jin's doubt was within his expectations. After all, any aristocratic family would find this kind of speculation humiliating. Our ancestors were brave, and patriotic, but that doesn't mean that our descendants can inherit their legacy. He smiled coldly. The Meng family of Meng County in Sang Prefecture. I heard from Huayu that you left Shangjing for some reason and didn't contact your family much. You probably haven't heard of it yet, right? Who was the Meng family from Meng County in Sang Prefecture? The most famous of them all was the ancestor of the Meng family, Meng Jing, Meng Ziliang, the founding noble of the Xia dynasty. He was praised as a white dragon among men by the founder of the Xia dynasty. In later generations, he was also known as the God of War. There were ancestral halls dedicated to him in all 5 countries. With such a tyrannical ancestor, the Meng clan had been greatly favored by the emperor since the Xia dynasty. They had tens of thousands of households, which had been inherited until the end of the Xia dynasty. Even when the 5 countries were divided into Xia, the status of the Meng family was still transcendent. This was not the original name of Meng County, but because of the Meng family, it was changed to the surname Meng. Of course, just as Qiguan Rang had ridiculed, the Mengs had a powerful ancestor who had laid down an illustrious family business. However, it did not mean that the younger generation of the Mengs could be so powerful. Not only could they not push the family to the peak, but they could also become more mediocre and absurd, living off their old capital. A gentleman's grace can be severed from 5 generations. Feng Jin was not stupid. He could guess what Qiguan Rang meant. The culprit who toyed with so many women and children in Meng County and even harmed the women in Hejin County should be from the Meng family. Never heard of what? Feng Jinsu knew what kind of people her age were like, but she still couldn't believe Qiguan Rang's guess. Naturally, it's about the matter of Tsang Prefecture's Meng County's commandant becoming a bandit and setting fire to the prefectural governor's manor. Qiguan Rang looked at Feng Jin's face and said with a malicious tone, "The county military chief is a retainer of the Mengs. He has always been loyal to the Mengs, but now he has rebelled against his former master and burned down the governor's manor. The reason for this has yet to be clarified." Coincidentally, the names of the official wife and daughter of the county military chief were written on the bamboo slips. "Huayu, do you think there is a connection between the two?" Feng Jin's lips moved. He was usually eloquent, but at that moment, his mind was a mess. He didn't know where to start. "Say no more. There is a connection." Just as Feng Jin's mind was in a mess, Jiang Pengji's cold voice came from outside. He subconsciously turned his head, only to see that thin person stride into the room from outside, and then kneel down in a slightly rough manner. However, at this moment, no one dared to express any dissatisfaction, because her face was already about to turn ashen. She didn't dare to mention it. "Oh." Qiguan Rang rubbed his feather fan on his palm. What did Lanting find out? Wei Yuan, who was at the side, became the background. Or rather, he was dumbfounded by the bombs that Qiguan Rang and Jiang Pengji threw at him. There were 4 noble families in Dongqing: the Feng family of Shanyang, the Wang family of Langjia, the Xia family of Longning, and the Meng family of Cangzhou. In the hearts of the people of Dongqing, although the first 3 families had a long history, their reputation was far from the Mengs, which had the ancestor of the god of war. Now, the 2 people in front of him were telling him that the bastard who made him a cuckold was most likely related to the Mengs. There was too much information. His brain was overloaded, and he couldn't wrap his head around it. According to the confession, the one who led them was a little bastard named Meng Liang. "Huayu, do you have any impression of him?" Feng Jin said, "I do. I have a good friend named Meng Heng. He is the eldest son of the Mengs, and his second brother is Meng Liang. However, Meng Heng is polite and knows when to advance or retreat. He is a rare gentleman, which shows how his family is." How can he have such a good brother? Someone who can be friends with a rich man is naturally a rich man. Similarly, someone who can be friends with a noble family must be from a similar background. Jiang Pengji snorted. "Huayu, I don't like your argument. The 9 sons of a dragon are all different. Your friend is a good one, but who can guarantee that his brother is the same? Even if they were raised together, there will be differences." Feng Jin was speechless. According to the confession, Meng Liang has been a prostitute since he was young. His mother indulged him, and his father spoiled him. When he was 11 years old, all the maids and servants in the house were touched. None of them escaped. But this person likes the new and hates the old. It has become a habit for him to rape women. Although the audience in the streaming room already knew some of the inside information, they were still stunned by the valiant young man. Hongjun Laozu's Juhua, #cry. Others have been with thousands of women at the age of 11. Iron bars are ground into needles. I am still single. Guimin's husband Baeo Boshan, #cry. Single +1. Are there any sisters who pity me? Zaixia Yiliankin, I, Yiliankin, am convinced. Zaixia Zhao Ritian, I, Zhao Ritian, am convinced too. Zaixia Long Outyan, I, Long Outyan, am convinced too. Jiang Pengji, could the style of the streaming room be unified? At least not at such a serious moment. It almost made her laugh. Jiang Pengji coughed and calmed herself down. This Meng Liang likes to mingle with people from all walks of life. I don't know where he learned an excellent disguise technique. Because he looks feminine and looks like a woman, he looks like a pretty girl after dressing up a little. Even his closest relatives might not be able to recognize him. Using this advantage, he is like a fish in water. He has tricked many ignorant girls into letting go of their worries and suffering losses. Perhaps it was because he was too gullible and easy to trick. He felt disinterested and had other ideas. It was boring to act alone. No matter how great one's achievements were, it would become a one-man show without an audience. Chapter 114. If one walked too much at night, it was only natural that they would run into ghosts. Meng Liang had been fooling around for too long, and there were times when he would give himself away. It was a pity that the Meng family, the local tyrant in Sangzhou, was so powerful that they completely suppressed the voices of the victims. In the end, they made a false accusation, causing the victims' families to break up and die. Seeing this, the victims could only grit their teeth and endure the humiliation. With his family protecting him, Meng Liang became even more unruly when he saw that he had only been scolded a little. Eventually, he got into big trouble. That day, the military officer brought his wife and daughter to the Meng residence to celebrate the old matriarch's birthday. When Meng Liang saw his wife and daughter's beauty, he was overcome with lust and wanted to imitate them. However, the military officer's wife was not an ordinary woman and saw through his disguise. Meng Liang held a grudge against him, so he used his father, Meng Zhan's name as an excuse to lure the captain out of the mansion. He took a few of his friends from all walks of life and took the opportunity to rape the captain's wife and daughter. The commandant's wife was still breathing, but her daughter had been raped to the point where she had lost her breath. In the end, she also went crazy and killed herself. Both mother and daughter died tragically. By the time the county commandant finished his work and returned home, it was already 3 days later. Only then did he find out that his wife and daughter had died. The Meng family concealed the cause of death and disposed of the body. Meng Liang was also restrained for a period of time. When the limelight died down, he would return to his old ways. Coincidentally, what Meng Liang had done was found out by the county commandant. Then, the county commandant set fire to the prefectural governor's manor. But how could the military strength of the county commandant compare with that of the Meng family? The commandant was quickly defeated and fled deep into the mountains, his whereabouts unknown. However, this matter was far from over. Although the incident with Meng Liang was the cause, the fact that the Meng family bullied the common people and exploited the merchants is true. It caused a lot of resentment among the people. Even though the county commandant was nowhere to be found, the civil unrest in Meng County was far from over. Meng Liang was escorted out of Tsang Prefecture's Meng County by the elders of his family. He planned to go to Shangjing to lie low. His friends from all walks of life were also afraid that the Mengs would blame them for leading Meng Liang astray, so they followed Meng Liang and left Meng County in Tsang Prefecture. Feng Jin was dumbfounded. Such an absurd thing. He thought he knew enough, but he didn't expect Meng Liang's actions to change his bottom line. No matter what, the Meng family is still the descendant of a good and loyal family. Even if they are not as strict as Duke Meng's era, they should not have raised such a maggot-like beast. The Meng family has gone too far. Wei Yuan rarely scolded people, but it was clear that he was furious. Thinking of his daughter, he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. That Meng Liang is a bastard, but he also loves his life. He's very cunning. In order to prevent one person from being exposed and implicating him, these people have very little contact with each other. No one knows where everyone is hiding. Therefore, even if they managed to catch one or two of them, they would not be able to catch everyone in one fell swoop. Jiang Pengji suddenly smiled. However, there is also an advantage. Wei Yuan looked at her in confusion. Things had already turned out this way. What could be good about it? On the other hand, Qiguan Rang seemed to have thought of something. A cold glint flashed across his gloomy eyes. It is indeed very good. The deeper they hid, the better. If they lost their lives without anyone knowing, the Meng family would not be able to pursue the matter. Hejin County was not Meng County, where the Meng family could control everything. It was surrounded by dense forests and mountains. It was common for a person to be eaten by a wild beast. Feng Jin understood what they meant, but he only opened his mouth and swallowed the words he wanted to say back into his stomach. Jiang Pengji only needed to achieve her goal. I have troubled you tonight. Tomorrow, I will come to your manor with gifts to apologize. I hope you can forgive my reckless behavior. Jiang Pengji looked through Lu Lanting's memories as she apologized to Wei Yuan. It was also a tactful gesture that Jiang Pengji did not want to disturb him anymore. She only needed to go home and sleep. As Jiang Pengji searched through Lu Lanting's memories, she bowed and apologized to Wei Yuan. It was getting dark, so she did not want to disturb him any longer. She wanted to go home and sleep, and she hoped that Wei Yuan would allow it. On the surface, Jiang Pengji seemed to be apologizing respectfully, but her eyes were calm. She had no intention of apologizing at all, which made Wei Yuan feel even more depressed. However, the information that had happened that night was too much for him to handle. He was a middle-aged man, and he was not as energetic as he used to be. Why would I blame you? You're doing this out of good intentions. Wei Yuan let Jiang Pengji off the hook easily, but the viewers in the streaming room were not. Now, no way. Is Master Wei Yuan just going to let it go? He doesn't seem to have any intention of taking it further. What the hell is going on? Hongjun Laozu de Jua, I'm not happy. Wei Yuan is the host's teacher. I thought he was a man of indomitable spirit, but it turns out to be disappointing. He doesn't deserve to be the host's teacher. His concubine is being bullied. Ai de Ling Ling, I'm disappointed too. He's not even as brave as the captain who set fire to the manor. He should at least say something. Zaixia Yi Liangshan, men don't have balls. If it were me, I would beat the sh*t out of Meng Liang's head. Zaixia Long Outyan, sh*t out of his head. Ha ha ha, brother Liangshan, I, Long Outyan, admire you in this streaming room. Jiang Pengji looked at the bullet screen calmly. She thought for a while and then sent a message. Host V, although I don't like Wei Yuan's reaction, I'm sorry to tell you that his reaction is very manly. It's not that he doesn't have a decision, but it's not convenient for him to say it in front of us. Jiang Pengji's words were like dripping water from boiling oil. It instantly caused an uproar. Aoxinqiang, host, I'm not educated. Don't mess with me. How can he be considered a man? Jiang Pengji looked out the window, speechless. According to Lu Lanting's memory, Wei Yuan's anger was mostly because his daughter was frightened and his reputation was tarnished. It was not because his concubine had cheated on him. Why? It was because that person was cunning and seduced Wei Yuan's cheap concubine. Cheap concubine, noble concubine, legal wife. These three terms had different meanings for Dongqing men. The legal wife was the wife, the noble concubine was the concubine with some status, and the cheap concubine was a commodity that was only bought for fun. Take a chestnut for example. If Wei Yuan's best friend came to visit and Wei Yuan asked him to stay the night, it was possible that the cheap concubine would serve him. Not to mention this, in some places where the atmosphere was more absurd, the male master would even let the pregnant cheap concubine serve the guests, or both parties would exchange cheap concubines for fun. The position of the cheap concubine in their hearts was nothing more than an object that could move. Even a clay figurine would get angry if someone touched their property without the owner's permission, but it would never reach the point where they would fight to the death. If Meng Liang had touched the county captain's concubine instead of his wife, the county captain would have been angry, but he would have tolerated it out of loyalty. _3, angle, _ under such circumstances, what weight could the cheap concubine have in Wei Yuan's heart? Wei Yuan's original intention for revenge was to seek justice for his daughter, not for the concubine. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.